Lately, after Dan's bath, I've noticed white threads floating in the bathtub. When I asked Dan about it, he just evades the question. On the eve of Dan going on a business trip, he gave me some aromatherapy oil that's supposed to help with morning sickness. After using it nightly as Dan instructed, I experienced severe abdominal pain and had to call for an ambulance. At the maternity clinic, when I explained the situation, the doctor was shaken. He said it was an aromatherapy oil that could endanger both the mother and baby. Suspicious of Dan's infidelity, I called his office and found out he had taken a personal day off to match the dates with Cindy. Heading to Cindy's apartment, I waited in the car and soon saw Cindy and Dan coming from across the street.
I want to live together soon.
If this plan works, we can push May back to her parents' house.
If she loses the baby and becomes emotionally unstable, it won't seem odd for us to live apart.
It's her fault for getting pregnant when I'm not even good with kids.
I buried my face in the steering wheel and sobbed. Eventually, I lifted my head and swore revenge on Dan and Cindy. I will never forgive them. I am May, a 40-year-old housewife. I met Dan at work and we got married 5 years ago. Dan works for a major company. He's a rank-and-file employee, but earns a good salary due to his diligent work. Recently, I finally got pregnant, something I've always wanted. Looking at the ultrasound picture, I eagerly anticipated the day I would meet our baby. But lately, I've been unbearably anxious. Something was off about Dan. Eventually, I realized Dan's true nature, and it sent chills down my spine. I became close to Dan when I was assigned to his team at his company, a subsidiary where we worked together. Dan, who was not the aggressive type at work, but was adored by his boss and loved by colleagues, had a gentle demeanor. Being someone who struggled with communication and took time to open up to others, I admired Dan. So when he asked me out, I seriously wondered what he saw in me. When he finally proposed, he answered with a gentle smile.
I like that you seem modest and obedient, and I find your looks appealing.
As someone who is self-conscious about being petite and having a youthful face, I was surprised but also felt joy. Afterward, we asked Dan's boss to be our go-between, and we got married. The first year passed without major issues, as we both reveled in our newlywed life. However, starting from the second year, I began struggling with balancing household chores and work. Dan had forgotten our promise to share domestic duties and started dumping all the housework on me.
I know it's tough, May, since you're working full-time too, but I just can't relax with the house in disarray.
I was puzzled. I kept up with the dishes and laundry diligently. It was just that I couldn't find the time to vacuum every day, leaving a bit of dust in the corners of the room. I wipe everything with cleaning wipes every day. We live in an apartment, and it would be bothersome to others if I vacuum early in the morning or late at night.
Yeah, I get that, but I like things clean. It just doesn't feel comfortable for me.
Despite saying this, Dan's study was always a mess. He told me not to enter his study, so I only peeked from the hallway. During that time, I was horrified by the sight of his completely cluttered room. The room was so cluttered with empty snack bags, liquor cans, and car magazines that there was hardly any place to step. His desk at work is tidy because he cares about appearances. Dan's complaints continued.
The meals have been pretty simple lately. You're just reheating pre-made stuff. I want freshly made food, but this feels no different from ready-made meals.
I was astonished. He compared the meals I prepared during the weekends to ready-made meals. Look, keeping the house spotless, cooking fresh meals all the time, and working full-time. That's impossible without hiring a housekeeper.
Then why don't you quit your job?
Dan said that coolly. But what about?
You could just become a full-time homemaker. I'll work more to make up for it.
A wave of anxiety swept over me. What if we have a child in the future and the education costs exceed our budget? While I was hesitating for an answer, Dan looked into my face and smiled kindly.
I'm worried about your body. It hurts to see you go limp every day.
Dan,
Please, become a homemaker for me.
I was proud of my job. I enjoyed my work environment and wanted to continue until retirement if possible, but I didn't want to cause Dan worry. After much hesitation and regretfully bidding farewell by my colleagues and boss, I resigned. I've always been shy and take time to warm up to others. But once I get close to someone, I tend to have deep and long-lasting relationships. That's why I vowed to always cherish Dan, whom I became involved with. Dan also treated me with care. However, as soon as I became a full-time homemaker and started depending on Dan's income, he began to adopt an intimidating attitude towards me.
Really? The orthopedic clinic changed doctors?
Yes, it used to be a female doctor. When I went there after a long time, her son in his 20s was treating me. He took over as the head of the clinic because his mother retired. Dan showed his displeasure when I mentioned going to the hospital after twisting my ankle.
Then stop going there. We'll switch to the hospital in the next town where a female doctor works.
But they asked me to keep coming until I'm fully healed.
No way.
He raised his voice unusually.
Just the thought of a young man touching your leg makes me feel sick. Are you okay with that?
I was surprised by Dan's words. It's just a medical examination. It can't be helped.
There are other doctors, right? We're changing to the next town next time. Otherwise, I'll stop giving you money for the visits.
Reluctantly, I switched to a hospital in the next town to appease Dan's jealousy. I didn't realize he was this jealous. I laughed to myself, but it gradually became no laughing matter. The next thing Dan complained about was my regular hair salon. When I mentioned that my stylist was going on maternity leave and I would be seen by a male hairstylist next, Dan secretly visited the salon and then started nitpicking.
That guy is no good. Paying $50 for such a haircut is a ripoff. Why don't you change to someone else?
I was taken aback, but calmly explained. That's the going rate around here. He's well regarded among people I know.
How so? He's just popular for his looks. He must be hitting on his clients.
Don't say that. He has a wife and kids.
Then it's cheating.
Dan sneered.
Just thinking of that guy touching your hair with his sleazy hands makes me so frustrated I can't sleep at night.
What? It's just a haircut. Stop making a fuss. Despite my protest, I eventually switched to another salon because he wouldn't stop complaining. Dan began to find fault even with me just going out briefly.
It's odd for a housewife to be out and about all the time. You should devote more to me.
What are you talking about? I do all the housework properly. I didn't quit my job just to be cooped up at home all day. Hey, if I want to go back to work, maybe part-time would be manageable.
No way.
Dan flatly refused.
The housework would surely suffer. I'm supporting us. So what's there to be dissatisfied about?
I was speechless at Dan's frowning face. When I confided in my college friend, Tanya, she was also astonished. Tanya works in the HR department at Dan's company.
Dan listens to us at work and never shows disdain towards women, but I see he's different in private.
He uses male chauvinism as an excuse, and it's troubling, but I don't want to fight with Dan, and he doesn't verbally abuse me, so I'm at a loss. Sipping coffee at a cafe, I sighed.
If it gets any worse, talk to me. I'm on your side, May.
Thanks. I replied with a smile, but I gradually became reluctant to go out and started to spend my days feeling depressed. One day, after feeling unwell for a while, I tried a pregnancy test, and it turned out positive. I couldn't help but cry out in the bathroom. I was so happy I cried, having almost given up hope due to my age. When I told Dan upon his return home, he momentarily tensed up before smiling.
Really? I can't believe it.
Me neither. I'll get it checked at the hospital tomorrow. I'll make sure to go to a place with a female doctor.
When should we tell your parents?
Let's wait until it's stable.
Right. We don't know yet if everything will be okay.
His words troubled me, but they were true. For now, I'll focus on having a healthy baby. However, contrary to my excitement, Dan seemed unwelcoming of the pregnancy. He had always said he was not fond of children and had agreed that we would give up if natural conception didn't happen. But I hoped his feelings would change now that we were expecting. There are plenty of people who say they don't like kids, but love their own. So I casually brought up the topic every day, hoping to make the reality of our baby feel more real to him. Nova, Halora, Freya. Modern names are so stylish, aren't they? Unisex names seem to be the trend. I continued speaking, undeterred by Dan, who was absorbed in his phone. What kind of names do you like, Dan?
Can't you see I'm busy? I'll leave it up to you, May.
I couldn't hide my disappointment at his curt response. On another day. You're taking a day off soon, right? There's a prenatal checkup that day. Let's go together.
Why should a man go? It's not like it matters to me.
I felt my cheeks stiffen. It was strange to hear it doesn't matter from a father-to-be. He delivered the final blow with a half smile, leaving me speechless.
I'm not good with horror movies, so spare me the delivery room, okay?
I was utterly disappointed by the inappropriate comparison, especially since childbirth is a life-threatening endeavor. However, plagued by morning sickness, I didn't have the energy to argue with Dan. Nausea, drowsiness, and lethargy made it almost impossible for me to cook or clean. Spending the day slumped on the sofa wasn't unusual anymore. I was worried about Dan's complaints, but it seemed even he found it difficult to grumble when I was frequently rushing to the restroom. Passing through the hallway with laundry, I heard the shower and remembered. Indeed, after Dan bathed, there were always white threads floating in the bathtub. It's thinner than human hair, and when scooped up, it's about 3 centimeters long. When I asked Dan about it, after a brief silence, he chuckled and shrugged.
That's just dirt, May. You are slacking off on cleaning the bath, aren't you?
No, it doesn't seem like that. I can't explain it well.
All right. Let's try to clean more, okay?
I felt brushed off, but not wanting to argue, I didn't press further. Not wanting to bathe in a tub with mysterious floating threads, I decided to stick to showers for the time being. The connection between Dan and the threads remained unclear. His recent string of late nights at work and increased business trips might be related. One Friday, Dan approached me with a beaming smile.
I've got a business trip to Chicago starting tomorrow. Sorry to leave you alone for a week, especially when you were having such a hard time with the morning sickness.
It's part of your job. It can't be helped. Take care, okay?
Yeah. By the way, I got something good.
He handed me a stylish white box. When I opened it, there were 7 small bottles with black lids lined up inside. Is this aromatherapy oil?
Yes, it's supposed to help with morning sickness.
Dan seemed excited.
A colleague's wife tried it and her appetite came back.
Really? How do I use it?
Add it to the bath water. It's effective as an aromatherapy bath. I asked for the instructions and wrote them down, so use it like this.
I'm not fond of artificial scents and usually stay away from aromatherapy oils and incense. I was grateful Dan wrote down the instructions. While reading the note, Dan stressed seriously.
Make sure you do it every day. For your sake, and the baby's as well.
Got it. Thank your colleague for me. From the day Dan left on his business trip, I took an aromatherapy bath every night. Not seeing any white threads, I felt safe soaking in the water. Let's see, 1 bottle per 200 liters of water. That's quite a lot. As I poured it into the bathtub, a potent fragrance wafted up with the steam. It seemed relaxing and likely beneficial for the baby as well. There were no immediate effects, but perhaps my appetite would be back by the time Dan returned from his trip. I continued using it, feeling hopeful, and reached the 5th day. During the bath, I suddenly felt a dull pain in my lower abdomen. Initially dismissing it as constipation, the pain intensified. Moaning in pain, I changed into my home clothes and called an ambulance. I was crushed by the fear that something might have happened to the baby. I informed them I was pregnant and asked to be taken to my regular maternity clinic. As I tried to explain my condition to the female head doctor, she crinkled her nose.
Did you put any bath additives in your water?
I've been taking aromatherapy baths. The doctor frowned. My husband got it from a colleague. It's supposed to be good for morning sickness. I don't know if it's related to the abdominal pain, so I brought it with me just in case. When I handed over the note and the bottle of aromatherapy oil my husband had given me, the doctor's face changed, and she started trembling. "Doctor."
Did you use this daily in an enclosed bathroom?
"Yes." After a moment of hesitation, the doctor told me in a firm voice,
The herb used in this aromatherapy oil can cause uterine contractions. It's strictly forbidden for pregnant women. It could have caused a miscarriage.
Everything went dark before my eyes. I felt faint but managed to stay conscious and urgently requested an examination. Fortunately, the baby was safe. I was told that my body should recover with some rest. I stayed in the hospital overnight and returned home by taxi the next morning. Back home, I still couldn't believe it. I had used the oil exactly as Dan had told me, and yet it had almost endangered our baby. I felt an urgent need to confront him with my anger. Waiting for his lunch break, I called Dan's mobile, but it just kept ringing. A bad feeling suddenly crossed my mind. His recent aloof behavior, the sudden increase in overtime and business trips, and now this incident. I had heard that many husbands cheat during their wife's pregnancy. Deciding to check with Tanya, I called her mobile. "Sorry to bother you during your break, but listen." Tanya gasped on the other end of the line.
So you're in a place with signal now.
"What are you talking about?"
Aren't you supposed to be feeling sick from morning sickness and staying at your parents' place? I heard it's in the countryside with poor signal, so I held back from sending messages. Since Dan is with you, I thought it would be okay.
"I'm at home."
What do you mean?
I heard Dan is on a business trip to Chicago. I could hear Tanya sighing.
He must have wanted to prevent me from contacting you, perhaps fearing his affair would be exposed.
"That's what it is." "Hey, is there a female employee who took time off during the same period?"
Let me check. Oh, it's Cindy from the accounting department. Should I give you her address?
"Yes, please." My anger outweighed my shock. I was sure Dan was there. I hung up and drove to the address Tanya had given me. I forgot my nausea in the heat of my anger. I parked my car where I could see the front entrance of the apartment building and waited for Dan and Cindy to appear. My car was common enough that I wasn't worried about being noticed while lying in wait. After about an hour, a couple holding hands approached from the other side of the street. Dan was with a woman with flashy makeup. She must be Cindy. Dan, carrying a heavy eco bag, looked visibly thrilled. Looking at him ignited a fiery anger in me. He was brazenly having an affair after putting me through such a hellish ordeal.
It's like we're newlyweds. It's so fun.
Cindy's shrill voice could easily be heard down the street.
I can't wait to live with you, Dan.
If this plan works, we can push May back to her parents' house. Divorce is tricky, but separation should be safe.
Cindy agreed with Dan's smug assertion.
If she loses the baby and becomes emotionally unstable, it won't seem odd for you both to live apart. You're so smart.
It's her fault for getting pregnant when I'm not good with kids.
Even after they disappeared into the apartment, I sat there stunned for a while. Then, intense rage surged from within. Tears overflowed from my eyes before I realized it. I'm so frustrated and ashamed. I felt nauseous as I blamed myself for not seeing through and trusting such a person. Leaning over the steering wheel, I sobbed. Eventually, lifting my head, I gritted my teeth and vowed revenge on Dan and Cindy. Dan and Cindy, I will never forgive you. 2 days later. In the afternoon, I went with Tanya, who had taken the afternoon off, to Cindy's apartment. I stayed outside the entrance hall to avoid being seen by the intercom camera.
Hello, Tanya. What brings you here?
When Tanya pressed the intercom, Cindy responded immediately. Her saccharine voice was grating.
Weren't you supposed to finish some documents at home? You left some materials on your desk.
Cindy easily believed Tanya's lie.
Oh no, silly me. Thank you. I'll go get them now.
It's okay, I'll bring them up to your room.
Really? Then please do. I'll unlock the door for you.
Once the door was opened, we went up to Cindy's apartment in the elevator. Making sure I wasn't caught on camera, I stayed back while Tanya called Cindy out. Soon the door opened, and Cindy, in a bathrobe and casual clothes, appeared. Taking a shower in the middle of the afternoon. How luxurious. They might have been planning to get cozy with each other after this.
Tanya, you're a lifesaver. Really reliable. Eat.
Cindy let out a sharp scream when I suddenly showed my face. As she tried to close the door, I wedged my bag in, slid my hand into the gap, and pried the door open. Cindy, with a resigned look, allowed Tanya and me into the room. From a half-open room at the end of the hall, we could hear Dan speaking in baby talk. Tiptoeing down the hallway and peering into the room, I saw Dan in just his underwear. His eyes softened, brushing a long-haired cat.
Tuna, you're being such a good boy. Staying still? I'll give you a treat later. Your fur is so smooth and silky today. You're the most handsome cat in the world.
Meow.
So that's it. The white threads were the white cat's fur. No wonder there was so much fur. He brushed his bare upper body against it, and he didn't rinse himself before getting in the bath. How could he do that before I, a pregnant woman, used it afterward? Eck, that's gross. Rage bubbled up as I saw Dan's affectionate face toward the cat. He cared more for his affair partner's cat than for our unborn child. The cat was the first to notice my resentful gaze. It flinched, looking scared, and ran to a corner of the room.
What's wrong, Tuna? Come and play with Daddy.
Since when did you become a cat's dad? Or did you get Cindy pregnant too? Dan's eyes widened as I stepped into the living room.
Why are you?
Dan, you've been careless.
Tanya emerged from behind me, causing him to startle.
That's right. You and Tanya are friends.
Dan exhaled as if in resignation, and Cindy hugged him from behind.
Dan, we've been caught.
It's okay, Cindy. Leave it to me.
His posture, standing there in his underwear, was ridiculous, and I almost laughed at the absurdity of the situation.
How are you feeling, May?
I've told you countless times how bad the morning sickness is.
No, I mean, since you are here, you must be fine.
Didn't your wife stop using the aromatherapy oil?
Cindy interjected.
That's why both the mother and child are healthy.
Oh, right.
You really should trust your husband more.
Cindy smirked, and Dan looked disappointed, which infuriated me even more. I did use it, because I was happy that Dan seemed to care about my well-being. Then I was struck with severe pain and had to call an ambulance. It was almost too late. I shouted, and Cindy interrupted with her sugary tone.
What a shame. A baby that daddy doesn't want should just disappear.
What? Do you even realize what you've done? You tried to take the lives of me and my baby.
That's not true.
Dan smirked dismissively.
It's not even born yet. So treating it like a person is ridiculous. Or are you even pregnant? You're just saying that to get attention because you sensed I was cheating, right?
Exactly. And the morning sickness must be an act, too?
My brain felt like it was boiling with rage at their laughter. I showed you the ultrasound picture, didn't I?
Maybe you borrowed it from another pregnant woman. Your stomach is flat. Can't trust that.
Could be someone else's kid, you know.
Enough from you two.
Even as Tanya scolded them, Dan and Cindy just grinned.
Well, even if it is my kid, I don't want it.
The words "I don't want it" tore my heart.
Don't do things without my permission. You're causing unnecessary trouble?
Why do you deny it so much? Do you hate the idea of being a father that much? Are you that bad with babies? When I confronted him with a question, Dan frowned and retorted sharply.
Of course I hate it. Who's going to take care of me when the baby's born?
Dan then unleashed a tirade of complaints against me.
May, you used to be cute when we got married, but you've gotten ugly with age. Being pregnant makes it unbearable. You've become thin, pale, and your skin is rough. No femininity at all.
Pointing at me, he continued his rant.
It's shameful for you to call yourself my wife while looking like that. I should never have married a 35-year-old woman.
And you, Dan, are getting a belly and losing your hair, becoming quite the middle-aged man yourself. Dan completely ignored my comment.
And on top of that, all you talk about lately is the baby. Have you forgotten I'm the main one here? As my wife, you should prioritize me. I don't care about the baby in your stomach.
I was dumbfounded by Dan's words. They were like those of a child. It was clear that both my unborn child and I would be unhappy with him as a father. Cindy, who had been gleefully listening to Dan's tirade, chimed in.
Dan doesn't care about a 40-year-old hag, right? A young beauty like me is what he deserves.
Right. It seems he'd be fine with any young and pretty girl. I agreed with a knowing look to Tanya. Tanya then pulled out not documents, but photos from a large envelope she had brought. Cindy watched curiously as the photos were laid out on the living room table. Looking at Dan, his previously arrogant demeanor had vanished, replaced by an awkward expression and visible unease.
You know about these girls, right, Cindy? They all work in the same sales department as Dan.
What are these?
I've gathered some voice evidence. Let's start the fun.
Hey, stop it, please.
After announcing what she had, Tanya pressed a play button on her phone despite Dan's pleas.
I'm secretly dating Dan. Keep it a secret from others. Cindy is already an old lady at 28, so he switched to a young girl like me.
Dan told me I'm his ideal woman. We've been dating for 3 months now. He's getting a divorce soon, right?
Dan said we should keep our office romance a secret because it would be troublesome if it got out. The trip during his business travel was so fun.
As Cindy's eyes narrowed with increasing anger, Dan looked surprised.
Tanya, how do you know I'm dating these girls?
You've applied for leave or worked overtime on the same days as these girls multiple times. I'm in HR, so it was obvious. When I prodded, they were more than happy to spill everything. They were eager to talk.
To a 24-year-old, 28 and 40-year-old ladies are all old women, right? I taunted Cindy, causing her face to flush. Tearfully, she looked up at Dan with resentment, choking out.
It's awful. To think you were with others besides me.
It's not like that. Cindy, you're the most important. You are the real deal. The others are just for fun.
Dan became flustered and started making excuses.
Look, a man needs a break, right? I can be kind to you, Cindy, because I let off steam with other women. You like to kind me, don't you?
It was nauseating. Instead of making a bad situation worse with poor excuses, he should have just apologized. Predictably, Cindy became furious.
What kind of logic is that?
Why are you mad? You're the one I treat the best. Shouldn't you be happy?
How dare you? I had no idea you were like this.
Cindy was nearly lunging at Dan, screaming and crying, while I watched with a detached gaze. What are you saying? It's because you're this kind of person that you cheat so easily and have no sense of responsibility as a father. You even tried to harm our unborn baby. Cindy stopped crying and looked intently at me. Both of us failed to see the true nature of men.
Shut up. Don't lump me in with you.
She snapped at me and then turned her anger back towards Dan.
Don't think you can do this to me and get away with it.
That's my line. You play the victim, but you were complicit in the aromatherapy oil incident, weren't you? I told Cindy in a stern tone. I've already reported it to the police. Both of you will be arrested for assault. Prepare yourselves. And I recorded all of today's confessions as evidence. Dan looked at me with panic.
Arrest. You'd turn your husband into the police. If you do that, your baby's father will be a criminal?
Hospitals have a duty to report. I think the clinic director already did. And don't worry, I'll be divorcing you. After exchanging a glance with Dan, Cindy started to defend herself vehemently.
I had nothing to do with it. Dan was the one who planned and executed everything.
Come on. When I complained about my nagging wife, you were the one who suggested using aromatherapy oil to make her ill and drive her out.
What? You got tired of her but said divorce was too complicated. You're the one who came to me asking for a way out.
Being able to come up with the aromatherapy idea. Oh, what a scary woman. Do you perhaps have a criminal record?
That's rich? Og, you're the worst. I only went along with that because you said it would be fine. Then you cheated on me and got caught so easily. I should never have gotten involved with you.
Dan clicked his tongue as Cindy resumed her hysterics.
How annoying. Women think they can get away with anything by crying. Stupid creatures.
Then someone ran the intercom.
Right on time. Please come in.
Tanya answered cheerfully, causing Dan to ask suspiciously.
A visitor?
Yes, our department head, Nicholas.
Cindy instantly stopped crying.
Nicholas?
I live-streamed our conversation to the company group chat. Then he decided to come over right away. Dan's face drained of color. Understandably so. The department head had acted as the mediator at our wedding. Dan tried to avoid divorce to not disgrace the department head and planned to make me ill so I would return to my parents' house. Ignoring the flustered Dan, Tanya let the department head in. He appeared with an angry expression.
Well, boss.
Dan and Cindy, with strained smiles on their faces, were then addressed by the department head.
Both of you will be transferred to a clerical department starting tomorrow.
No way. I got dragged into this.
And I was about to be promoted to section chief in the spring personnel changes. Will this delay my career?
The department head, with a vein throbbing on his temple and a sharp gaze fixed on Dan.
I had a high regard for your diligent work, but to find out you're this kind of person, I'm disappointed.
Nicholas, it's all her fault. I didn't want a child. She got pregnant on her own.
Dan pleaded with tearful eyes, but the department head gave him a frosty glance.
Rather than thinking about promotion, you should consider yourself a candidate for termination. If the company's performance declines, you too will be the first to be let go. Do your best to avoid that.
After being dismissed, Dan's expression turned to one of despair. The department head turned to face me and apologized sincerely.
I'm sorry for the trouble caused by my subordinates. I will ensure they take full responsibility. Please don't hesitate to speak up if you need me to give a statement.
I should be the one apologizing for the inconvenience caused. I apologized to him in return. Dan and Cindy were slumped on the floor, their heads hanging low. I marveled at their audacity, wondering if they truly believed they could treat me so poorly and continue to live peacefully as before. Their brazenness was astounding. I'm preparing to return to my parents' home with Tanya's help. Dan, send the divorce papers there. I will make claims for alimony and child support through a lawyer. I watched as Dan weakly nodded in acknowledgement. Then I left Cindy's apartment, together with Tanya and the department head. The next day, Dan and Cindy were arrested for assault, but were released a week later on probation due to being first-time offenders. I heard that the two of them broke up shortly after. Despite continuing to work in a sideline position at the company, they resigned after being ostracized due to widespread rumors. Having received the alimony, I am indifferent to what happens to them afterward. While Cindy's whereabouts became unknown, Dan, disowned by his parents, resorted to multiple part-time jobs to get by. Tanya mentioned seeing Dan in the city, looking shabby and nothing like his former self at his previous company. My ex-in-laws, upon learning of the incident, traveled from the countryside to apologize to me. I had always been treated well by them and held no resentment toward them. When my daughter was born recently, I cried tears of joy. So I plan to visit my ex-in-laws with her during holidays like summer vacation and Christmas. If she ever wants to meet her father as she grows up, I'll consider accompanying her under certain conditions to fulfill her wish. Seeing my daughter's innocent smile makes me pity Dan for saying he didn't want such a lovely child. Being a mother is challenging, but I feel deeply fortunate to be her mother. I want to continue watching her grow, surrounded by people who love her.
Why did I realize something was off but not try harder to get her to talk about her troubles on the phone? Why did I just think she would talk about it eventually? Maybe if I had listened, this wouldn't have happened.
Stop it, it's not your fault. I'm to blame too. Maybe I pressured her too much with work. Even if not, I was there and should have noticed and supported her.
My best friend had taken her own life. I was nearly crushed by regret. At the funeral, my husband felt the same. Whenever we spoke, we only blamed ourselves. After the funeral, I went to my best friend's parents to apologize for not doing anything when I noticed he was off during our phone call. My husband also apologized to them for not being able to deal with her, even though he was always nearby during work. My best friend's parents told us it wasn't our fault and asked us not to blame ourselves. Even hearing that, my husband couldn't raise his head for 5 minutes. As the funeral ended and my husband and I were about to leave, my father stopped me.
There's mail at home for you. It might be something important, so don't forget to take it with you.
Why did my best friend send it to my parents' house instead of mine? Feeling uneasy, I decided to stop by my parents' house alone on the way home. What arrived was an envelope, slightly bulging, indicating several pages of a letter inside. With trembling hands, I cut open the envelope to reveal its contents. The letter was folded in 3, comprising about 4 pages. Opening it, the first page simply read, "Please read this without your husband finding out," in large letters. Puzzled, I moved on to the second page. At the top of the second page, in large letters, was what seemed to be the title of the letter. Just by reading that title, I could guess what the rest of the letter contained. If I was right, it would contain something dreadful. My hands shook, but I gathered my courage to continue reading. What followed was an astonishing truth. I am Emily, a 27-year-old office worker. I'm currently on maternity leave just after giving birth. My husband, David, is 6 years older and owns 3 restaurants. He was initially also an office worker like me, but he suddenly decided to quit his job during a relationship.
I've always wanted to own a restaurant. I thought if I get older or married, I wouldn't be able to take such risks. It's easier to bounce back if I fail while I'm young. So, can I quit my job?
At that time, David was 29, wanting to act before turning 30. I was only 23, more inclined to support and encourage my dreamer husband than to hold realistic views. Many people in their 30s and 40s just drag along in their jobs, right? It's better to go all out on what you want to do now. Just make sure if it doesn't work out, you find a new job and don't mope around, okay?
Don't talk like I'm bound to fail.
Encouraged by me, David quit his job and gained experience in a friend's restaurant while preparing to open his own. His concentration and action towards the goal were impressive, and in just 2 years, he was nearly ready to open his restaurant. However, there was one persisting issue. Can't you find anyone yet?
Yeah, it's hard to find experienced people willing to work for a not yet existent restaurant.
Isn't it okay to wait until the restaurant opens? Is it a bad time to post for staff?
That would be too late. If we can't find anyone by the opening, the restaurant might not operate smoothly.
David had been advised by his mentor in the restaurant business that securing an experienced right-hand person before starting was crucial. The restaurant owner also has to do some work outside the restaurant. Also, there are critical tasks in the restaurant that you can't just leave to part-timers. It would be too much for my husband, David, to handle all by himself. So, it seems wise to secure at least one person he can confidently leave in charge. However, finding someone experienced enough to run the place is no easy feat. David was racking his brain over this every day. One day, I stumbled upon a post from an old friend, Lisa, on social media. My old friend Lisa worked at a restaurant for almost 10 years, so I tried sending her a message. To my surprise, the response was positive, and it led to an introduction to David.
Are you really willing to join us?
Yes, I can help with setting up and eventually take charge of some aspects, right?
Actually, I'll be relying on you since you have way more experience than I do.
I've always wanted to own a restaurant too, so getting involved in building and managing a restaurant will be great experience for me.
Even with 10 years in the industry, you can't go solo?
It's more about the money than experience. The pay in this industry isn't great, so saving up to start a business is tough. Besides, setting up a restaurant costs a fortune, and with my track record, just as an employee. So, not having enough savings means you can't borrow what you need. It's ironic. People like David who've worked corporate jobs have more credit and capital, so they often start businesses before those who've been in the industry longer.
The restaurant business is tough, huh?
Exactly. That's why getting involved from the ground up is a valuable experience for me.
My experience in the industry is limited, so having Lisa around is a huge help. Looking forward to working with you.
This solved the staffing issue. With the problem resolved, David's restaurant setup progressed rapidly, and soon it was up and running. Lisa's experience compensated for David's lack of it, helping the business grow steadily. But David seemed troubled. Hey, Lisa, the restaurant is thriving, but David looks down. He won't talk about it. Is there an issue at the restaurant?
An issue? I don't think so. But maybe he's just exhausted from the workload and pressure. He's been nonstop since we opened, right? Also, he took out a loan of about $100,000 to start the business, right? There's the repayment. And even though things are going well now, the fear of sales dropping is real. Wouldn't it be weirder if he seemed totally fine?
I see. It's his first time as an entrepreneur, so maybe he's feeling the grind.
Exactly. That's why, Emily, you need to support David's mental.
I understood Lisa's point. As a new entrepreneur, David faces pressures I can't comprehend as a corporate employee. I can't assist him in his work like Lisa can. So, I make sure he can relax at home, ensuring he has nothing to do and can immediately take a shower after work. That's about all I can do, but it seems my small acts of kindness have reached him, and he gradually recovered his energy. As David felt better, the restaurant prospered even more. Good things continued, and 3 years after starting the restaurant, we got married, and 3 years later, we had our daughter, Amy. Everything seemed smooth. But that was only on the surface. Behind the scenes, things were not going well. My daughter brought me happy days, but David is starting to lose his energy again. He didn't talk to me the last time he felt down, and I doubt he will this time, but I asked him about his recent mood anyway. Recently, you seem down. Is there a problem at the restaurant? Surprisingly, David shared the reason for his gloom.
Actually, a new restaurant opened up nearby. It's fancier and more stylish than ours. It's like an upgraded version of our place.
So, they're taking your customers?
Yo, they've been open for 3 months, and their momentum hasn't slowed at all. They're attracting even more customers. If our sales keep dropping, we might not sustain the business, and I've only paid off about half of my loan.
I regretted asking about his troubles. I wanted to know, but there's nothing I can do to win back the customers lost to the competitor. All I can do is nod and be a sounding board for David's complaints and worries. I understand that I can't help with his job. Even so, wondering if there was anything I could do, I reached out to Lisa. Again, things haven't been great at the restaurant lately, have they? David told me. Is there anything I can do?
Probably not much. Maybe save on the cost of one part-timer by helping out at the restaurant.
I can't help at the restaurant because of Amy.
Right? That's why I said there isn't much. David is bustling to get the restaurant back on track, so he'll probably be fine. Please keep supporting his mind like you've been doing.
Got it. Then I'll leave the business support to you, Lisa. Take care of David, please.
Sure, I got it. Leave it to me.
6 years since David started the restaurant. Lisa and I had gone from friends to best friends. I could consult her about anything regarding David, and she would advise me. I've sought her advice on issues with David, and her guidance has always been spot on. If she says David will turn the restaurant around, then I trust it will be okay. I decided to follow my best friend's advice and continue supporting David's mental. Months later, as Lisa predicted, David managed to revive the restaurant. It was more like fortune favored him, though. Did the restaurant that was stealing customers from David's place close down? It was doing well, wasn't it?
Our new menu was a hit. We managed to win back the customers. The other place got scared off by my skills and retreated early.
A single menu change doesn't just flip the situation, right? Maybe they moved because they were more successful than expected, to a location with better conditions and more space.
That's because they were intimidated by my skills. Watch, the other stores will start fleeing too.
Yeah, I get it. Looking forward to it. With the competition gone, David's restaurant sales rebounded. In fact, several other eateries around him closed down. With fewer restaurants nearby, his business saw even greater growth. In these times, it's not unusual for restaurants to close. However, David took this coincidence as validation, boasting, "See, just as I said. This area is practically my territory now, the David Empire. No one can compete with me." He was getting carried away. When people get too cocky, it often leads to failure, and I was worried he might face a harsh reality soon. But his restaurant continued to thrive. Riding high on success, David was completely swept up in enthusiasm.
It's going so well. I'm thinking of opening a second location. I plan to leave Lisa in charge there mostly.
Have you discussed this with Lisa?
Yo, we talk, and she's on board.
I was worried because Lisa has mentioned wanting her own place someday, so I thought she might leave.
I plan to have Lisa help us for the long haul. I won't let her go.
Hearing about the second location, I was amazed at how carried away David was getting, but knowing that Lisa would be in charge blew away my exasperation, and I wholeheartedly supported the idea. The second location was completed quickly. With experience in creating a successful business, Lisa quickly made the second location a popular spot. With the second restaurant thriving, David's confidence soared even further, bordering on recklessness.
Now that I've established the David Empire around the second location, I'm thinking of changing things up and opening a bar. Not just any bar, but one with an upscale vibe, exclusive, by reservation or referral only.
Isn't that a bit too cocky? Just deciding to open a bar like that, as if it's so easy?
Don't worry. Everything I do turns out great.
David laughed with full confidence. If I weren't his family, such arrogance might have been unbearable. But I knew of all the struggles he had overcome since opening the first restaurant. Having overcome those challenges, I felt he deserved to ride this wave of success. I decided not to interfere with the bar's opening. The bar, being smaller in scale, was completed even more effortlessly than the second restaurant. I've never been to a high-end bar before, so I asked my husband to show me the new place. Isn't the bar ready? Show it to me before it opens.
What? The bar? Oh, no, I can't do that. I can't even tell you where it is.
Why not? You showed me the first and second locations before they opened.
Didn't I mention the bar's concept is an upscale hideaway? I want it to be exclusive, accessible only to people I know, like company CEOs or at least directors.
Are you saying I can't enter because I'm poor?
It's not like that. I don't think you'd leak the location, but you never know how information might slip out. I just don't want to take any small risk that could compromise the concept.
Fine, but at least show me some pictures of the interior.
Okay, I'll take some pictures next time.
While I wanted to see the bar, I understood that accidentally leaking any information could ruin the concept, and I wouldn't want to bear that responsibility. Reluctantly, I backed off, but it still bothered me. When feeling like this, venting to a close friend is the best remedy. Lisa, you know where the new bar is, right?
Yeah. Well, I need to know for work, in case of emergencies.
It bothers me that I'm the only one out of the loop. Come on, just tell me secretly.
No way. Absolutely not. Emily, you don't need to know.
All right. No need to get mad. While talking on the phone, I sensed a different vibe from Lisa than usual. However, if she had any issues, she would bring them up herself. Since she didn't, I assumed it wasn't the time yet. Lisa has always listened to my worries and complaints about David. If she has any problems, I will listen to her fully. But that conversation ended up being our last. Days later, Lisa took her own life at home. A family photo was found in her pocket, and another lay on the floor. The picture on the floor was crumpled, so she probably clutched it until the last second. At Lisa's funeral, I was overwhelmed with regret. Why did I realize something was off but not try harder to get her to talk about her troubles on the phone? Why did I just think she would talk about it eventually? Maybe if I had listened, this wouldn't have happened.
Stop it, it's not your fault. I'm to blame too. Maybe I pressured her too much with work. Even if not, I was there and should have noticed and supported her.
Whenever we spoke, we only blamed ourselves. After the funeral, I apologized to Lisa's parents for not noticing her distress during our call. David also apologized to them for not being able to deal with her, even though he was always nearby during work.
Lisa always said she wanted her own place. So when David put her in charge of the second location, she was thrilled, almost fulfilling her dream. Please don't apologize. Her decision wasn't because of work.
Don't blame yourself, Emily. We, her parents, should have noticed any changes first. You used to play with Lisa a lot in elementary school, right? She would be happy you came today.
David couldn't lift his head, even when Lisa's parents urged him to, staying bowed for about 5 minutes. Though told not to blame myself, it's hard not to feel responsible, especially since I spoke to Lisa just days before her death. After the funeral, as my husband and I were about to leave, my father called out to me. It wasn't unusual for him to attend the funeral since Lisa and I were childhood friends and our homes were close. But it was strange to see him with a troubled expression, not one of sadness or loneliness. I had David go back to the car first, and I listened to my father.
Emily, there's a letter for you from Lisa at the house. It might be something important, so don't forget to take it with you.
It wasn't strange for Lisa to send mail to my parents' house since she knew their address. But she also knew mine. Why would she send it to my parents' house instead of mine? If she had something to say, a call would suffice. or she could have given it to David. Feeling uneasy, I decided to visit my parents' house alone. Sorry, I'm going to my parents' place alone. You go ahead. Dad will give me a ride back.
What? Weren't you planning to stop by your mother's to pick up Amy?
Well, you know, Lisa was my childhood friend, right? Thinking about all the memories, I just didn't want to leave this place. And, oh yeah, my parents and I, we all knew Lisa well since she was little, right? So, I wanted to reminisce about the old times with them.
I see. Maybe you should stay the night then.
Yeah, I think I will. I waved goodbye to David's car and then got into my father's car to head to my parents' house. Arriving home, my mother handed me the letter that Lisa had sent. I didn't know what it contained. I went to my old room in my parents' house to check the contents alone. What arrived was an envelope, slightly bulging, indicating several pages of a letter inside. With trembling hands, I cut the edge of the envelope with scissors. Upon cutting it open, photos and a USB drive fell out. But I decided to read Lisa's letter first. The letter was folded in 3, containing about 4 pages. The first page had "Please read this without your husband finding out" written in large letters. Puzzled, I moved on to the second page. At the top of the second page, in large letters, was what seemed to be the title of the letter. Just by reading that title, I could guess what the rest of the letter contained. It must contain something dreadful. My hands began to shake, but I mustered the courage to continue reading. The letter contained an astonishing truth. After reading it and knowing the truth, I considered pretending ignorance and fleeing from my husband. But if David realized that I knew the truth, it could put both me and my daughter in danger. Also, if I were to divorce, I might lose custody of my daughter. Knowing the risks, I resolved to confront David. I spent the night at my parents' house and returned home the next day. When I arrived around noon, David was preparing to leave.
You're back.
Where are you going?
I'm heading to Lisa's place. There are some documents there needed for the restaurant. I've got her parents' permission to pick them up.
To Lisa's house. Take me with you.
No, I already told her parents I'd be going alone. And there are some documents that shouldn't be seen by anyone outside the restaurant staff. I'll go by myself.
Knowing the truth, I could tell my husband was lying. I had been deceived by David, but knowing the facts beforehand, I could easily see the other side of his mind. As he insisted on going alone, I saw him off at the entrance. It seemed I had to act quickly. Once he was out of sight, I too left the house. I arrived at Lisa's apartment building. Standing at the entrance, I heard noises inside, like someone rummaging through things. The door was unlocked, so I quietly entered. In the living room, David, unaware of my presence, was frantically flipping through files he had pulled from a shelf. You didn't find what you were looking for, did you?
Whoa, you scared me.
Startled by my voice, he dropped the files, scattering the restaurant's documents all over the floor.
Damn, it's you. I told you not to come.
While gathering the documents, he complained. But then he paused, remembering my words.
Did you say I wouldn't find what I was looking for?
I felt like I was seeing a different person in my husband. His suspicion towards me clearly heightened. But his heightened suspicion didn't matter. I was there to tell David the truth. So I spoke openly and honestly. Lisa sent a letter to my parents' house. It had everything about what you've been doing these past 6 years since you started the restaurant.
What? A letter? It mentioned me. What did it say?
He seemed to be probing how much the letter revealed. Unfortunately for him, it revealed everything. Lisa had told me all. You've become like a collaborator with the gangbanger, haven't you?
So, you know everything, huh?
Yes, starting from when those gangbanger guys came demanding protection money when you first opened the shop.
Damn it, so you know it all.
but you stood your ground and refused to pay at that time, right? Nowadays, the gangbanger can't be as brazen as before due to stricter law enforcement.
That's right. But that was the beginning of our involvement.
You first turned to the gangbanger when a competing store opened near ours, right?
They came by again around that time. After being refused by the other store, they just happened to stop by ours too.
And that's when they offered to take down the rival store in exchange for money. His face turned regretful as he recalled those moments. David was frantic, fearing that the restaurant might not survive if things continued as they were. Fearful of losing the restaurant he built with a loan of $100,000, I could somewhat understand his desperation. Lisa must have felt the same. Both lost their cool and succumbed to the gangbanger's whispers. The gangbanger today can't just storm into places and wreak havoc, but they exerted pressure from behind the scenes and even sent thugs to truly take down the competition. They thought of it as a one-time deal, but once you engage with the gangbanger, cutting ties becomes difficult. The relationship continued, and David began giving a part of the restaurant's earnings to the gangbanger. You became defiant, paying the gangbanger to take care of various things, didn't you?
Sure, I had them pressure the surrounding stores to get rid of them.
So, you got rid of anyone who could stand against you in the area, creating David Empire, and got carried away, leading to the bar, right?
You know a lot. That bar was for overcharging, hosting important gangbanger guests, and strategizing their next moves.
That's why it was such a secluded hideaway bar. Around the time the bar was established, Lisa was under a lot of pressure, wasn't she? Not just with the restaurant, but also being forced into criminal activities.
We were in business together, so naturally, I had her help out.
But Lisa wanted out, right? She was suffering, being forced into crimes, and earning resentment from others.
She was paid well for her help. No reason for complaints, and I couldn't just let her leave, knowing what we were up to.
And you threatened her with harming her parents, or even me, to keep her in line. Talking to David made me feel nauseous. Though cornered, Lisa was at fault for turning to the gangbanger. But David, who got a taste for it and became reckless, was worse. It seems Lisa was coerced by David and the gangbanger into silence, leading to her tragic decision.
Now that you know everything, I can't let you go. You'll replace Lisa. Don't even think about talking to the police. You know what would happen if you did, right?
I thought maybe you were also trapped in your dealings with the gangbanger and struggling to break free. But unfortunately, that doesn't seem to be the case.
Huh? Money's rolling in. Why would I want to cut ties?
Hearing David's remarks, I sighed deeply. As if on cue, 2 police officers entered the room.
This is enough. It's dangerous, so please step back.
Yes.
What's this? You already called them.
Yes. You came here to destroy evidence linking you and the gangbanger, right? Did you find any?
No, nothing came out. You came after me.
Lisa sent not just a letter but also evidence of your crimes with the gangbanger, like documents, photos, and a USB drive. Before coming here, I stopped by the police station. You were already under surveillance by the police. So, after explaining the situation and showing the evidence, the police decided to come here immediately. There are only 2 inside, but there are more officers outside, so you can't escape now.
So, I'm already cornered, huh?
That's right. As I mentioned earlier, I thought maybe you were just struggling with breaking ties with the gangbanger. So I convinced the police to give me a chance to persuade you to surrender voluntarily. But we had an agreement that if things seemed dangerous at any point, they would intervene. They came in because you started threatening me.
Why would Lisa send the evidence to you? It would only put you in danger.
Lisa had already decided to end her life. If she took the evidence to the police herself, she might get detained and unable to complete her intention. Sending it by mail, She wasn't sure if it would be thoroughly checked, and there was a chance it could be dismissed as a prank if inspected. So, she wrote in the letter that she wanted me to deliver the evidence to the police directly. You really drove my best friend to her limits.
Can you come with us to the station to talk more about this?
David, who had perhaps believed he wouldn't get caught, now seemed to grasp the reality of his situation as he heard the police speak, his anxiety becoming evident.
No, I was just deceived by the gambanga. I did things, but I didn't want to, you know. It's my first offense, so it shouldn't count as a crime, right? I'll just go to the station, they'll hear me out, maybe give me a warning, and I'll be home soon, right?
The two officers grabbed David's arms and led him outside. He either resisted faintly or couldn't accept the reality, walking a bit slower than the officers. As David was placed into the patrol car, it drove away without blaring the siren. Subsequently, he was arrested and charged with crimes like extortion and blackmail related to the restaurant. He was also involved in fraud and illegal transactions, facing charges for those as well. Ultimately, even as a first offender, he was sentenced to 5 years in prison due to the sheer selfishness and severity of his crimes. The gangbanga members connected to David were also arrested, though it seems only the lower ranks were caught, and the core group remained untouched. While laws against organized crime are advancing, these groups still find loopholes, continuing a cat-and-mouse game. Nonetheless, with David and his accomplices behind bars, I believe my daughter and I are safe. Even if David is released, he's not a gangbanga member himself, so he shouldn't be able to harm us. If any gangbanga did come after us, their grudge would likely be directed at David for his failures. A move might be all that's needed for precaution. Naturally, I will divorce him. Even my in-laws plan to cut ties with him. So upon release, he will be alone. Without the restaurant and branded as a criminal, he'll have no credibility, support, or resources. He might even be pursued by the gangbanga for revenge. His future seems bleak, and he should spend it reflecting on his actions. It's tragic that my best friend took her own life. She had her faults, but she suffered immensely and ultimately saved my daughter and me. I expressed my gratitude at her grave and informed her of my completed move. My daughter is only 1 year old now. She is my sole purpose in life. I am determined to ensure her happiness, leaving my friend's resting place with this resolve.
Get out of here, you worthless woman.
In front of me, glaring at me as if with deep contempt, is my husband. When he calls me worthless woman, I instinctively touch my own stomach. I've suffered for this belly, giving birth to 3 daughters with my husband. But what my husband wanted was a son. I still remember being told, when I gave birth to our eldest daughter, and then our second daughter, next time, it'll be a boy. When our third daughter was born, my husband even left the naming entirely up to me. I sighed, feeling like divorce might be inevitable. Tommy, my husband just smirked faintly.
Don't worry about an heir. There's already someone who'll give birth to a boy.
I'm Angie, a full-time housewife. I've just turned 40. I'm currently living with my husband, Tim, and our 3 daughters. It's been 3 years since I gave birth to our third daughter. This month, I've decided to quit being a full-time housewife and start working. That's because with just my husband's income, it's impossible to afford the extracurricular activities for our 2 older daughters. I've decided to work for the sake of our 3 children. Fortunately, I found a job quickly, and now I'm working while also covering our household expenses. But lately, my husband has been complaining more and more about how we need to take care of his aging parents because they are getting older.
I'd really appreciate it if you could quit your job to take care of my parents, Angie.
It's still too much to ask.
Why's that? With my salary alone, we can live comfortably if we're not extravagant, right?
I haven't been extravagant at all. I'm working because with just your income, we can't afford extracurricular activities for the kids.
We don't need them to have extracurricular activities. They don't have to learn anything.
This is how my husband always complains to me. So, whenever this topic comes up, I've learned to deal with it casually.
Are you listening, Angie?
I understand. I'll try to help out. Honestly, I'm not fond of my in-laws. So, deep down, I don't want to cooperate with their care. But my husband and I live near his parents' house. When we got married, my husband suggested we start our married life in an apartment near his parents' house. At the time, I didn't know his parents' true nature, so I casually agreed, thinking, that'll make things easier for me too. But soon enough, I witnessed their true colors. It was about 6 months into our marriage. My mother-in-law asked me to help clear out a space to put a big table they'd bought so we could all gather, and when I went to help at my in-laws, that's when it happened. I was treated like a servant by my in-laws, constantly being told to put that over there, clean this up, bring out the tea, and so on. As a newlywed, I didn't know how to handle it, so I just went along with whatever my in-laws said. Because of that, every time I visited my in-laws, the treatment got worse and worse. Every visit to my in-laws' house felt like being treated as a servant, forced to listen to my in-laws' old stories and tales of hardship for tens of minutes. And then they'd end by saying, "Hurry up and give birth to a male heir," even meddling in our private life.
That's because having a boy is better. Actually, there's no point in giving birth if it's not a boy.
Even my husband, who wanted children, says things like this. When I got pregnant, the only thing my husband and in-laws cared about was the baby's gender. When they found out our first was a girl, I was berated and subjected to hurtful words.
It's just the balance. Having a son would be nice, you know.
And when the second and third were also girls, my in-laws blatantly lost interest in them. All my in-laws have ever said is, "You must give birth to a boy in X time."
Why is the house always messy, even though there's no rowdy boy playing around? Blaming busyness, you can't even clean properly. Because you're such an negligent woman, maybe that's why you can't give birth to a boy.
Even though you've only given birth to girls, you'll end up marrying them off elsewhere anyway. If you're not going to produce an heir, you should focus on serving us, the heads of the family.
This is how they speak, despite being their own grandchildren. I didn't want to go to a house I wasn't invited to and didn't want to visit, to be treated like this. It's unbearable. I've told my husband many times that I want to keep my distance from my in-laws, but it never resonates.
The house being messy is a fact, isn't it? Girls are supposed to quietly play with picture books, right? So why is it so messy? If you can't even handle cleaning, which is supposed to be a woman's job, maybe that's why you can't produce a boy.
I don't think it's fair to say that housework and childcare is my wife's job when we both work and raise 3 kids.
If you're going to use work as an excuse, why not just quit and become a housewife? If you can't do that, then maybe what Mom is saying is true, isn't it?
Do you think you can support me and our 3 daughters with your income alone? That's why I'm working too. His words give me a headache. Sure, in the past, it was an era where the husband worked outside and the wife protected the home and children. But now, it's not that era anymore. It's become commonplace for wives to work too. Accepting that as the flow of the times, to say that household chores and childcare are still solely a wife's job is just too antiquated. No matter how many times I explain, my husband doesn't change. Mom's right, exactly what Dad says. Every time those words are thrown back at me, divorce crosses my mind. But my daughters, who know nothing, are attached to my husband. Only our eldest, a middle schooler, seems to have some reservations about my husband. Probably due to her adolescence, she doesn't seem to interact much with him. Still, when I see our youngest innocently smiling and begging for a hug from her daddy, I can't bring myself to divorce. Then, around 3 months later, something strange started happening. For some reason, my husband's return home became increasingly delayed. Suspicious, I asked him about it when he finally came home. "Tim, you've been coming home unusually late lately. Is something going on at work?"
Nah, just happened to be. One of my team members messed up today, so I had to stay overtime. Don't worry about it.
The words my husband spoke, I believed them at first. But as time passed, and he started coming home late more often, I began to question. He'd say, got held up with entertaining clients, or meeting with partners ran long. Despite feeling suspicious about my husband's behavior and actions, I couldn't muster the courage to confront him, afraid of taking away the beloved father from my children. I began to live as if I didn't mind my husband's late returns. This continued for about 6 months until one day, a coworker said something to me.
I saw him walking with a young woman in the downtown area.
"He's at work. There's no way that's possible." I told her so, but
I couldn't have mistaken it.
she insisted. We were close friends, often going camping or having barbecues together with our families due to our kids being around the same age. My friendly husband and this coworker always got along well when they met. So I knew she wouldn't mistake my husband for someone else. But even knowing that, I desperately wanted to believe in my husband.
When we meet next time, should I say something?
Feeling my heart stop momentarily at her words. "I'll talk to my husband properly," I assured her. Though what she saw wasn't my husband, I hoped it was just a mistake. I visited a detective right after work to request an investigation. 5 days later, the detective contacted me, saying it was quite straightforward. When I met the detective after work, I was given substantial evidence. There were several photos of my husband entering a hotel with another woman, and the results were damning. Deciding to confront my husband about his infidelity as soon as I got home. Even though he had come home before me, he was just sitting in the living room, scrolling on his phone. I saw my eldest daughter taking her younger sisters to their room as soon as she noticed my presence. Feeling sorry for them, I couldn't hold back from confronting my husband about the affair. Tim, care to explain what this is all about? I've been hearing excuses about overtime and entertaining clients, but is going to a hotel with a business partner considered entertainment now? My husband remained silent, his face turning cold as he started dialing a number somewhere. For some reason, my husband has decided to remain silent and not talk to me. Why won't you say anything? Does your silence mean you're admitting to it?
It's got nothing to do with you, Angie.
You think it's okay to cheat on your wife and pretend like it doesn't concern her?
It's got nothing to do with you.
No matter how many times I asked, all my husband said was, "It's got nothing to do with me." Then suddenly, the intercom in our house started ringing. Thinking it was a bad time, but considering feigning ignorance, my husband immediately went to answer the door. It was my in-laws who came in through the door. And there she was, the woman from the photos I received from the detective. What's going on? Did you call them?
I wasn't planning on telling the truth until everyone was here.
Well, everyone's here now, so explain, what's the meaning of these photos? I confronted my husband again, thrusting the photos in his face.
Angie, she's pregnant with a boy. Our family needs a male heir to carry on the lineage. I've been saying this to you even before we got married. We need a boy in our family. And yet, you've given birth to nothing but girls, Angie. So you're of no use anymore. Get out immediately.
My husband, finally talking properly, came at me with absurd accusations while handing me divorce papers. Wait a minute, pregnant, what does that mean? How far did you go for that to happen? Sure, I knew about the desire for a son, but there's no way to choose the gender, right? Besides, weren't you fond of our daughters?
You were the one who could only give birth to a girl while listening to Tim. If you are such a person, shut up and leave this house.
I am sorry, but I am not talking to mother-in-law right now. I am talking to Tim. Tim, please explain to me what the hell is going on. I questioned my husband, and for some reason my parents-in-law entered the conversation.
Angie, you've always been someone who couldn't give birth to anything but girls despite Tim's wishes. It's best for you to leave quietly.
I'm sorry, but I'm not talking to father-in-law right now. I'm talking to Tim. So why are the two of you interfering? Please don't try to change the subject. Despite my protest, my husband let out a heavy sigh.
Enough now. Don't we? We don't need to discuss anything. All you need to do is leave this house quietly.
What are you saying? We have 3 daughters, and surely you understand that with my current income alone, it's impossible to support all 3, right, Tim?
It's got nothing to do with me. You wanted to have all girls, didn't you? Just get out.
Don't be ridiculous. What do you mean wanted to have? You used to care for all three of them, didn't you? Why are you suddenly saying this? As I expected my husband to say something in response to my words, it was his affair partner who retorted.
This is why dealing with older women is such a hassle. If you're told to leave, you should just leave without fuss.
What's your problem? It's your appearance that's making things complicated in the first place.
Complicated? It's just because the wife couldn't bear a son, isn't it?
The affair partner smirked while looking at me. Somewhere deep down, I realized I had been expecting too much from my husband. With 3 children, and the youngest daughter adoring Tim so much, I desperately wanted to believe that divorce wasn't the only right answer. Even my husband thought that if he was confronted with the evidence, his children would be on his mind. I believed that even if I could not reform and become a good family friend, he would be a good father in front of his children. But in reality, he just brazenly brought his affair partner even in front of our children, showing no remorse. I understand, I'll divorce you. I've had enough, I was too naive. Feeling this acutely, I stood up and went to pack my things. Though I felt a pang of irritation towards the affair partner, who was smirking as she watched me, I didn't care anymore. I snatched the divorce papers from Tim and signed them hurriedly. I wrote my name as the custodian for our daughters. I'll take custody of all 3 daughters. I'll demand compensation and child support later. I'll leave for now, but I'll come back for the things I can't take with me later.
Do whatever you want.
Even my usually sarcastic in-laws listened to our conversation without making any snide remarks, though they looked displeased. It seemed they were leaving this discussion to Tim. That's how my husband, knowing all that, came at me all bold-faced. I sensed the tension and hugged my eldest daughter, who was peeking from the room. Was that all it took for her to get the message? My eldest daughter glared at my husband and immediately started packing. Maybe my second and third daughters think we're just going out to play, as they cheerfully prepare their outing sets. Even as we headed to the front door with our minimal luggage, no one emerged from the living room. My second and third daughters seemed puzzled, but they happily waved goodbye and left the house. I contacted my parents' home. Due to the distance, I've only returned home a few times since getting married. It was a sudden call, but my mother immediately said to come back whenever I could. Since they were coming to pick us up, we decided to stay overnight at a hotel. There, without telling my daughters about my husband's affair, I said this to them. Mom and Dad, our paths have diverged. My 2 young daughters, who love certain artist group and had heard this from a recently disbanded group, seemed to understand.
That means they can't be together anymore, right?
My eldest daughter seemed to grasp my words. I returned with my daughters to my parents' house, where I was constantly busy with paperwork such as changing the family register and various other name changes and administrative procedures. And before I knew it, 2 months had passed, and I successfully received compensation and child support from my husband and his affair partner. I demanded compensation for adultery from both of them, and I also claimed child support from my husband. I didn't want to see their faces anymore, so I decided to involve lawyers in everything. It costs money, but I think it's a good investment because it relieves stress. According to the lawyer who went to see my in-laws, they fell silent like they had eaten a bitter bug when the topic of compensation and child support came up. However, it would tarnish their reputation if their son got another woman pregnant due to his infidelity. To prevent further escalation, both my husband and my in-laws desperately pooled their resources to pay for it. Moreover, it seems that my husband and in-laws even took on the compensation for the affair partner's share. Then, another 3 months passed. Although we couldn't afford luxuries, with the support of our parents, we began to lead a peaceful life as a family of 6. Both my daughters and I were gradually getting used to the absence of my husband. On a day off from work, my husband suddenly called. He kept calling repeatedly when I ignored it. Thinking that it would be troublesome if he kept calling until my daughters returned from their lessons, I reluctantly answered the call from my husband.
Thank goodness. You finally picked up the phone.
What do you want all of a sudden?
Well, you see, the affair partner gave birth the other day.
What am I supposed to say to that? Just as I was about to coldly end the call, my husband suddenly raised his voice.
The baby's sex.
According to my husband, the affair partner gave birth to a girl. And it wasn't a case of misjudgment during the ultrasound. Apparently, the doctor had confirmed it was a girl from the beginning. The reason the affair partner lied about the gender of the child she was pregnant with was to marry my husband. Apparently, my husband had been considering divorce if the child wasn't a boy, but it was my in-laws who put a stop to it. They were worried about not having any grandchildren, so my husband halted the divorce. He immediately wanted to think about having another child, but our daily life was too chaotic for that. With the baby just born, I had no job and no income. When I tried to focus on housework to perfection, I was told that it was impossible because of childcare responsibilities, and I firmly refused to take care of my in-laws. Well, it's understandable given that we were living with a baby whose neck hasn't even stabilized yet. I'm so focused on the baby that it's difficult to do housework as perfectly as before childbirth, and I don't have the physical or mental capacity for taking care of my in-laws. Despite living with such a new bride, my husband suddenly mentioned divorce. So, what's the point of telling me this? I said coldly.
Angie, please, can't we start over?
My husband said to me. Oh, it's way too late for you to think we can reconcile. I snapped at my husband.
Don't say that. Angie, please, there's something delicate about you, like a rose with thorns. I love that about you. So, let's give it another try.
My husband tried to persuade me with overly poetic words. His words sent a chill down my spine.
Angie, are you listening? We've been together for a long time, right? Just because we've been a little distant. Your feelings haven't changed, have they?
Maybe his words of love would have resonated with me when we first got married. but considering my husband's affair and our subsequent divorce, even if he says such things, all I feel now is coldness. I chuckled with a wry smile.
Your smile means you're forgiving me, right?
My husband said, misunderstanding. How are you just plain stupid? That was a wry smile. I'm not laughing, and I haven't forgiven you.
Why are you saying that? Angie, please, consider starting over. We've always managed well, right? You've been happy until now, haven't you?
It wasn't going well. That's why we argued so much. I wasn't happy. That's why I divorced you. Besides, you were the one who said you didn't need me.
Isn't that right? So, we can start over, right? I was the one who initiated the breakup. And now I'm suggesting we start over. So, let's do it.
My husband started saying all sorts of crazy things to reconcile with me. He even brought up things from the past, and honestly, I was getting fed up. But then, I suddenly had an idea and changed the topic of the conversation. You know about Henri.
What? How do you know Henri's name? We didn't even do introductions back then, did we?
My husband seemed surprised that I mentioned his remarriage partner's name. Of course I know. I heard it from the detective, and I even sent a certified letter for the alimony claim. So, she's my girlfriend.
What does Henri say?
Well, now I'm wondering who she's targeting next. You see, she enjoys interfering with happy couples and breaking them up. So, after divorcing you, I wondered who her next target would be. My husband remained silent. Was he dumbfounded, mouth agape? Regardless, I continued explaining to him what I knew about Henri. I described how Henri had always been cute since childhood, always surrounded by various people. How even her father, the company president, doted on her, buying her whatever she wanted, making her a bit spoiled. And how because she could have anything, taking things from others became a hobby. As she grew up, her targets became boyfriends, fiancés, husbands, and other men. Because she enjoyed taking, she would easily discard them after getting what she wanted. When I introduced her social circle investigated by the detective, my husband seemed taken aback.
What the hell? Why are you saying this now? If you had told me when we were divorcing, I wouldn't have gone through all this.
At that time, you just told us to leave. You didn't even bother listening to our side. So, we just did what you said. Besides, it's not like it's reasonable for a woman who knows you're married to approach you.
Don't talk like that, Angie. You're being unfair. You're making it seem like it's all my fault. If only you had explained properly back then, things would have been different.
My husband suddenly sounded dejected, playing the victim card. My anger surged at his words, and I snapped at my husband. After cheating, what's with that tone? It's not like it's bad, it's you who's bad. From now on, live however you want. I don't care anymore. To my words, my husband suddenly adopted a gentle tone.
Angie, it's going to be tough for you to raise 3 daughters alone, right? Even if I take just one and raise her by myself. So please hand over one of the 3 to me. If you do that, it'll be easier for you, Angie. Having just 2 kids is enough, right?
The sickeningly sweet tone of his proposal made my head spin. What does he even think of our daughters? Sending them to such a man is absolutely unthinkable. Neither my husband nor my in-laws truly care about the well-being of our daughters. My husband repeatedly talks as if anyone will do, or it's fine with just one, or in a way that dehumanizes them. All I can see is a future where my daughters will be crushed by my husband and in-laws as they grow older. As they grow up, they'll understand the mistreatment they've been subjected to, just like me. That's why I firmly refused. Don't be ridiculous. I'll raise my daughters properly.
Don't say that. Children still need a father, right?
My husband retorted with stubbornness. A father who can't even properly take care of his children, let alone indulge in infidelity, has no right to claim custody. To prevent my husband from misunderstanding even the slightest bit, I spoke assertively. It's up to the girls to decide if they want a father like that or not. They're still young, so until they can make their own judgments, I'll responsibly raise them. With fury, I ended the call with my husband. Perhaps it was due to immediately blocking his calls, but I never heard from him again after that. Several more months passed. It seems that my husband's divorce from Henri also went smoothly. Henri took the newborn child and returned to her parents' home. Apparently, the father of the newborn child was also married. So not only my husband but also his real wife is demanding compensation. Perhaps facing economic difficulties, she seems to be striving in childcare while receiving support from her parents at home. It's terrifying that she shows no sign of remorse even now. She acknowledges her wrongdoing and shows sincerity by paying compensation if caught. However, it seems that her father, who is the company president, advances the money for this, and she leads a carefree life. It turns out her meddling with my husband was just a whim. With her natural beauty and status, she freely took other people's boyfriends and married men as she pleased, and now she has set her sights on married men as her next target. She apparently wanted to turn married men's heads, and happened to spot us, a married couple, in the street. It's quite a nuisance to have our lives ruined on a whim like that. And the reason Henri decided to marry my husband, which usually ends once she takes what she wants, was because my husband was indecisive and too lenient with Henri. Henri was apparently looking for a man who would treat her like a princess, listen to her every whim, and buy her whatever she wanted if she decided to marry. I feel indifferent about it now. My husband, who easily succumbed to her, and Henri, his mistress, are both unbelievable, and I was speechless with disbelief. While my husband was deceived by his mistress, he could have also declined her advances. No matter what stories I hear, the fact that my husband betrayed me remains unchanged. I heard that my husband's family had been abandoned by friends and relatives and had moved far away. After moving, they unexpectedly stormed into my house only once.
Angie, stop playing around and give us one of the kids.
That's right. It's not good for you to raise them alone. So we'll raise them together.
Please stop. I'll manage raising them on my own, so it's okay. Perhaps they thought it would be okay since my youngest daughter was still very young. The three of them had fierce expressions and tried to take away my youngest daughter, so I resisted desperately.
It's impossible for you. You can't raise them while working. Hand her over.
Angie, it's pitiful. We'll take good care of her, so don't worry.
They wouldn't listen to anything I said.
Stop. Don't take her away. That's kidnapping.
My youngest daughter cried loudly, and I shouted back just as loudly, refusing to back down. The nearby residents heard our voices and quickly subdued the three of them. Soon after, the police arrived in response to the report, and the three were taken away. I thanked the neighbors repeatedly and rejoiced in my youngest daughter's safety. Afterward, the three of them were issued a restraining order. However, this incident made me consider moving again. Ultimately, I couldn't feel safe just because of the order. Since their whereabouts were known, there was always a possibility that those three would come back. If I discussed it with my parents, who lived with us, they said it would be a nuisance if they were to be harassed forever, so they decided to sell the house and move with me. However, I still felt sorry for repeatedly changing my daughter's environment. But just watching my daughters smile and grow healthy made me feel better. To protect them, I decided to move to a new place. Shortly before the move, a call came from an unregistered number. Thinking it was the moving company or someone from the municipal office, I answered, but it turned out to be Henri, of all people. After summarizing her tearful ramblings about having contracted a serious illness from having too many relationships with men, she begged for treatment and demanded the return of the compensation she had paid. I coldly replied to her pleas. "You have a wonderful sugar daddy who buys you everything, right? I have nothing to do with you." Without waiting for much of a response, I hung up. I blocked her on the spot and immediately bought a new cell phone so that she couldn't contact me anymore. While repaying my parents for their help, I will continue to do my best to ensure my daughters grow up healthy.
Mom. Hey, Mom. Wake up.
I was suddenly shaken awake, and my eyes barely opened to see my daughter's anxious face looming in my blurry vision. I slowly sat up and asked her, "What's wrong with you? Did you have a nightmare?"
No, Mom, please. We need to run away from Dad now. Hurry?
What? With that single word, my groggy mind snapped to alertness. What followed was a shocking revelation from my daughter that left me dumbfounded. My name is Sarah. I'm a 35-year-old ordinary woman who works while raising my 7-year-old daughter. Emily, our precious gem, is not only adorable but a bit unusual, or rather has some mysterious aspects.
Mom, you're forgetting your umbrella.
What? The weather forecast for that day was partly sunny with clouds. Despite the thick clouds, there were patches of blue sky. I was stopped by my daughter as I was about to leave the house before her. "It's fine. There's only a 10% chance of rain today."
But Mom, you're going to get soaked. I saw it in a dream. Please take an umbrella with you.
Reluctantly, I took the umbrella she handed me and headed to work. No way. I encountered a sudden downpour just before I was about to return home. I was surprised and came home drenched, only to be proudly greeted by my daughter, whose umbrella was also wet on the stand.
Welcome home, Mom. See, it happened just like I said.
Emily has had this slight mysterious power since she was very young, accurately predicting the weather and dinner menus. It might be an exaggeration to call it a precognitive ability, but it's unusual. She sometimes feels out of place because of this trait when playing with friends, but she doesn't seem to mind. Above all, we, her family, have accepted this as part of her uniqueness. And she's otherwise a perfectly normal, adorable girl. What concerns me more is my husband, Mike, who is the same age as me. We met through a marriage agency. Back then, I was a hard-working career woman. I was successful but inexperienced with relationships. Urged by my impatient parents, I registered with the agency. It might be odd for a wife to say, but Mike was even more handsome back then and instantly charmed me. Moreover, he was a feminist, and I instantly fell in love. Our relationship quickly progressed with marriage in mind. My husband and I have been married for 10 years this year. He always comes home late these days. Emily is only 7 years old, and she still requires a lot of care. Juggling her care, household chores, and work without Mike's help has been overwhelming.
Everything costs money these days, and we need to save as much as we can for Emily's sake. You never know what might happen, so I'm working hard.
That's what he said when I asked him about it. I can't argue with him when he says it's for Emily's sake. I've been overwhelmed with work, household chores, and solo parenting. Then, one day, Mike came home early, looking extremely tense. Sensing the mood, I sent Emily away before asking, "What's wrong? Did something happen?"
Actually, I want to quit my job.
What? It was completely unexpected. After putting Emily to bed, we talked, and it turned out he's been struggling with workplace relationships and no longer finds his job fulfilling, making it a pain to go to work.
Don't blame me. I just can't take it anymore. Once things settle down, I'll find another job right away. Until then, I'll take care of everything at home.
I didn't want him to quit, but forcing him could lead to worse outcomes. I see. All right. Reluctantly, I agreed to his request. Before long, I got serious about my job, and my husband became a stay-at-home dad. His way of doing household chores and cooking was, to put it mildly, a bit sloppy compared to when I did them. What particularly bothered me was the meals. I came home around 9 o'clock in the night when my daughter went to bed and ate my husband's homemade food. But there was a lot of fried food and the seasoning was surprisingly strong. So I always needed water. The first time I ate it, I couldn't help but confront him. "What is this? You didn't feed the same thing to our daughter, did you?"
No, I made sure to prepare something with lighter flavors for the kid. And I kept the portions appropriate. I thought you'd appreciate something with a bit more flavor after a long day.
Too much fried food, not enough vegetables, and the soup barely tastes like anything. I'd be fine with a lighter seasoning for kids, and I wish you'd pay more attention to balancing the meals. Despite my repeated comments, the seasoning and menu hardly changed. If I tried to leave anything uneaten, he'd say,
"I'll save it for our daughter to eat tomorrow."
"That's a joke. I'd rather eat it myself than let our daughter have it." Reluctantly, I'd finish my meal, and as an apology, he started offering dessert after dinner. He also began preparing a nightly drink and snack, calling it a nightcap set, thinking it would please me. I hadn't been much of a drinker or late-night snacker before, but I couldn't outright reject his kindness. I appreciated his efforts in cooking and his attempts at being a good house husband. So I generally turned a blind eye, enjoying the break from household chores. About 6 months into my role as the primary breadwinner, I finally had a day off with absolutely no plans. However, I felt off from the morning and lay down feeling foggy. Lately, I've been feeling lethargic without any fever and suffering from headaches. I'd fall asleep right after eating. Maybe I've been overdoing it at work. Luckily, my husband took our daughter out to a nearby large shopping mall, promising to contact me if anything came up. I was grateful for his thoughtfulness, allowing me some much-needed rest. Feeling grateful to my husband in my heart, I was dozing off.
I'm back.
I woke up to the sound of the front door and my husband's voice. I realized that it was already evening. I had slept through the day without having lunch since before noon. Welcome back. Sorry, honey, I couldn't play with you today. Did you have fun? I asked our daughter, holding a palm-sized character mascot she must have gotten while out. But she nodded quietly, looking down, unlike her usual self. I tilted my head, puzzled by her unusual behavior. What's wrong? Did something happen?
Maybe she's just tired from walking around all day. You should take a shower and rest early, okay?
My husband gently placed his hand on our daughter's shoulder, and she nodded slightly before heading to her room. When she was out of sight, I quietly asked my husband, "Hey, she seemed a bit off. Did you scold her or something?"
No, I didn't do anything. I think she's just tired. Anyway, about dinner.
I tensed up at his words. I was frankly fed up with his cooking. About dinner, I'll cook tonight. I've had a restful day and feel energized.
Oh, okay, then. I'll prepare the nightcap. I even bought dessert as usual.
He smiled, lifting a bag that clearly had the logo of a famous cream puff shop. Let's make tonight's meal low-calorie and good nutritious. Later, we had dinner together and decided to sleep together for the first time. Though she smiled when it was just the two of us, I could tell she was anxious and wanted to spend as much time together as possible.
Mom, I have something to say.
In the privacy of our bedroom, wrapped in blankets, my daughter whispered in a voice so faint I almost missed it. What is it?
Please don't drink any alcohol at tonight.
What? Could this be another instance of her slight precognitive ability? Nodding in response to my daughter's serious gaze, she closed her eyes, seemingly reassured. And so, before my husband could prepare our nightcap, I went to bed and decided to sleep early. Surely, he wouldn't go as far as to wake me up for a drink. If he tries to wake me, I'll just pretend to be asleep. With that thought in mind, I closed my eyes.
Mom, hey, Mom, wake up.
I was suddenly shaken awake, and my eyes barely opened to see my daughter's anxious face looming in my blurry vision. I realized I had actually fallen asleep, my vision blurry as my daughter's anxious face came into view. Checking the bedside clock, I saw it was 2 a.m., and I noticed my husband, who should have been sleeping next to me, was absent. Maybe he went to the bathroom. Slowly sitting up, I asked her, "What's wrong? Did you have a nightmare?"
No, Mom, please. We need to run away from Dad now. Hurry?
What? That single word snapped me out of my grogginess. What did she just say? Asking her quietly, still in shock. Why? Why would you say that?
This is our chance while Dad's not here. Because if we don't, something bad's going to happen to you, Mom. Like getting sick or an accident.
What do you mean? As I stared dumbfounded, my daughter, unable to hold back any longer, started to cry. Holding her in my lap and gently stroking her trembling back, she gradually calmed down and began to speak. According to her, while returning from the restroom at the mall, she overheard her dad on the phone. Having always been told not to interrupt when someone is on the phone, she approached quietly.
Dad was saying, just a little longer, and she'll be gone. Planning to make it look like an accident or illness. Once that's done, we can be together with the insurance money.
Who was he talking to?
I don't know. At first, I thought it was you, Mom. But it wasn't. Because, Dad, he was saying bad things about you, and he said I love you to the person.
If this was true, my husband was planning to send me to my demise. Besides, my husband is having an affair. My daughter was sobbing and continued.
He said I love you to someone not Mom. I was so shocked, I accidentally called out to Dad. Then Dad immediately ended the call and asked, how long have you been there? When I said just now, he smiled and said, let's keep this our little secret from Mom. If you don't tell, you'll get a new, kind, and sweet mom.
Tears and snot streaming down her face, she clung to me.
But, I want you. I don't need another mom. I love you so much.
She wailed, clinging to me. In that moment, I felt an overwhelming sense of guilt for putting her through this, and anger towards my husband. My daughter had braved her fears to protect me from her own father. How scared she must have been. How much courage she must have needed. Afterwards, holding my daughter, we went downstairs to the entrance. The moment I noticed my husband's favorite shoes were missing, any slight trust I had in him vanished alongside my daughter's words. According to her, this wasn't the first time he had left in the middle of the night. She had seen him leave several times when going to the bathroom. How had I never noticed before? Even in deep sleep, if my daughter rarely wakes up at night and had seen him leave multiple times, it must have been frequent. My daughter was gripping the hem of my dress tightly. Her actions made me realize there was no time to doubt my husband. That's right. This is not the time for that. I need to respond to my daughter's courage. Perhaps because I hadn't drunk any alcohol, I felt more alert and clear-headed than usual. Looking into my daughter's eyes, I said, Emily, if we run away from Dad now, we might never see him again. Will you still come with me?
Yes, I'm scared of Dad. I want to be with you, Mom. I want to stay with you forever.
All right. I made up my mind. Fortunately, my daughter was in the middle of her summer vacation. I told her to pack what she needed, and I quickly packed our bags as well. And then, I was stunned as I checked the contents of the drawer where I kept our valuables. Opening another drawer that I rarely open, my suspicion was confirmed. A surge of anger rose within me, but for now, leaving was the priority. We hurriedly left the house before dawn and decided to seek refuge at my parents' house. My parents were surprised to see us arrive so early in the morning, but they kindly welcomed us after showing them what I found just before leaving and explaining what my daughter had told me. After the day had fully dawned, I sent a casual message. My mom got hurt. I'm taking my daughter to help out for her a month or so. Please take care of the house while we're gone.
Got it. Leave everything here to me.
He was surprisingly calm about his daughter and wife disappearing overnight. Surely, he must be smirking, thinking he can now do as he pleases alone. I'll lay low for now, but I won't let this go, for my daughter's sake. As soon as we arrived at my parents' house, my daughter, still with tear stains on her cheeks, fell asleep. Looking at her sleeping face, I made a certain phone call. About a month after taking refuge at my parents' house, I decided to return to our home, leaving my daughter with my mom. I entered the living room after unlocking the door, my smartphone in my chest pocket. My husband, who had been holding his head in front of his smartphone, gave me a forced smile as if nothing had happened.
Oh, welcome back. Don't just come back suddenly like that. You surprised me. Oh, how about I make you a nice iced coffee with lots of milk and sugar?
If it were the old me, I might have been deceived, but not today. I don't need it. Instead, I want you to write this. I confronted my husband, who was about to head to the kitchen with divorce papers. He sighed deeply after glancing at them.
Divorce, huh? Well, if that's what you really want, I'll agree.
His reaction was expected, but it infuriated me. He casually accepted it with a smile.
I'll agree to the divorce since you're the one asking for it, but you'll meet my demands for the settlement, right?
What are you talking about? You're the one who'll be paying.
What?
My husband looked puzzled. He shook his head unwillingly with a forced smile.
Come on, I've been supporting you in my way, and now you're handing me divorce papers unilaterally.
A good husband. The kind that skips work for affairs and plans to put his wife in danger?
What are you talking about?
I couldn't help but snort at his dumbfounded face. I pulled out a small bottle filled with pills from a drawer I hardly used and showed it to him. The label read, "For stubborn insomnia. 1 pill for a good night's sleep."
I bought it because I couldn't sleep well.
It's obvious if you look at it. The amount hasn't decreased since I left. I opened and took pictures of everything before I left. Want me to compare?
Don't talk nonsense. Besides, where's the proof that I gave those to you?
Everything you've been doing with your mistress. I know all about it.
What?
I returned to my seat with the bottle in hand, pulling an envelope from my bag and spilling its contents. My husband froze in shock. No wonder. Those were printouts of messages he had sent to his mistress. It says things like, "I'm skipping work to see you. Wait for me."
I quit my job so we can talk more. Love you. I got something that'll make sure she won't wake up. I can visit you during that. Think we can be together soon. Wait for me, my princess.
He sent this kind of message. Every lie about working late and his plans to make my demise look like an accident or illness were detailed. Thinking back, the meals he prepared for me were high in salt, fat, and even sugary desserts. It's no wonder my health declined. Plus, he probably tampered with my drinks while I took a shower. I didn't drink often, so I didn't notice. But when I drank the same thing at my parents' house, the difference in taste was shocking and confirmed my suspicions. I started feeling unusually tired after beginning to eat your meals. I never felt refreshed despite falling asleep quickly. No wonder with alcohol in these pills. Mixing them is the worst. Imagine what could have happened. My husband's face turned pale as his eyes darted around.
How come you have this stuff? Don't tell me you snooped through my phone. That's a violation of privacy.
No, I got it from her, your mistress.
What?
I flipped over a second envelope to show him, and his face went white. No wonder. The scattered photos showed him getting cozy with a young woman. Right after returning to my parents' house, believing my daughter's words, I contacted a private investigator to track my husband's movements. He probably never imagined I'd doubt him. Not even 3 days after we left, he was bringing his mistress into our house, living as if they were newlyweds. It was easy to find out about his mistress's background, from her real name to her workplace. A few days ago, I negotiated with your mistress. I showed her the photos and said if she provided testimony and evidence favorable to us, I'd reduce the compensation fee. She handed over her phone and said, "Do whatever you want with it." My husband was flipping between his phone and the photos. He muttered things like, "So that's why." And she betrayed me. I tapped the divorce papers laid out on the table. Now, onto the main issue. With all this evidence, I could go to the police, but I don't want the father of my child to have a criminal record.
So, what then?
Sign the divorce papers. Plus, the settlement money, alimony, child support. Oh, and the savings you spend on your mistress. You'll pay that back, right?
Wait a minute. It was just a fling. Divorce just like that.
Whether it was a fling or not doesn't matter to me. You betrayed your family. You inflicted trauma on our daughter. You tried to end my life. After all that, thinking you could get away with it is delusional. As I said that, my husband collapsed to his knees. Just as I thought that, he grabbed my leg, glaring at me fiercely.
It's your fault for being such a charmless woman. Did you really think I'd just return everything quietly?
My husband raised his fist. I pursed my lips, stared him down, and pulled out my phone, holding it up to his face. I've been on the phone the whole time since I entered the house.
What?
His fist froze. As his grip loosened, I quickly stood up and gathered the documents I brought. The person on the other end of the phone is my father and my lawyer. They're waiting just around the corner, ready to come in at any moment.
No, that's not. It's different.
I've been recording all as well, so I'll use it as evidence. From now on, we'll communicate through my lawyer. My husband, lost for words, slumped down as I left the house with my belongings. I got into the car where my father and the lawyer were waiting, sighed, and then called my mother, who was looking after my daughter. My daughter cheerfully greeted me on the phone.
Mom? Did you finish talking with Dad?
Yay, Emily, I'm sorry. I talked to him, but it turns out we can't live with your dad anymore. Her reply was silence. Guilt for taking her father away from my little daughter hit me, even though I had resolved myself. Sorry, Emily, that. Well.
Mom, it's okay. I understand. I'll be here for you.
Her words enveloped me softly, making the back of my nose tingle. Tears welled up, and my father beside me offered support. Later, we got divorced. The apartment we lived in was sold due to the division of assets, and I returned to my parents' house. My ex-husband, jobless and unable to afford a lawyer, couldn't pay the agreed amount and ended up begging his parents for help. His parents were furious with him. My in-laws paid a compensation and other expenses he owed me in full as an apology. Afterward, he tried to cling to his mistress, who quickly discarded him. Unable to find a decent job, he now leads a difficult life filled with odd jobs, as I heard from my in-laws. Meanwhile, I began a new life with my parents and daughter at their home. Emily stopped making her mysterious comments after moving but made good friends at her new school and seems happy every day. We might face many challenges ahead, but I swear, on my now empty ring finger, to raise my daughter well and ensure her happiness.
I got pregnant with the boss's baby. Guess I'll be taking the boss's wife's spot now.
In that moment, something inside me broke. She had been ridiculing me, the boss's wife, boasting about her youth, and constantly trying to outdo me. Now, she's even taken my job as the company's executive assistant and is attempting to take my husband as well. In that case, I won't hold back anymore. I'll see them plummet to the depths of hell. I decided to pretend to celebrate my husband and Michelle's union. I agreed the divorce with Jack. Of course, I received a generous settlement. They later had a lavish wedding in Hawaii. The situation shifted a week later. I got a call from Michelle.
Hey, Jack hasn't come home. You're his ex, so you must know where he is, right?
Michelle's voice was frantic. As I had predicted, I smirked. Oh, I didn't mention it, but he is.
What?
I revealed my husband's shocking secret side. My name is Karen Adams. I'm a 58-year-old working housewife. At my husband Jack's company, I work as an executive assistant. At 6 a.m., I get up earlier than my husband and make breakfast. Then I go to the office by myself to clean and tidy up the executive office. It's a daily habit. I do it so Jack can enjoy his work. At 8 a.m., Jack comes to the executive office.
Oh, thanks, Karen. You cleaned again today.
I walk up to Jack and retie his tie. It's fine, dear. You want to work in a clean room, don't you?
Yeah, you're right.
Jack and I had an arranged marriage. We haven't had children, but we've lived together, compromising and cooperating. This year marks our 30th wedding anniversary. The company Jack took over from his Phil is stable, and I've had no complaints about our life. By the way, about that new venture you proposed, the chairman agreed to fund it. The payment was confirmed just now.
That's great. Kevin seems to like you. You negotiating helped a lot.
The company is led by Jack as the president and his older brother as the chairman. His brother's name is Kevin. Jack affectionately calls him Kevy. Speaking of which, didn't the chairman fund another project you proposed before? Aren't you going to proceed with that? When I lightly asked, Jack seemed a bit irritated.
That's okay. I'll handle it.
I see.
You have the whole day free today, right?
Yes, because you mentioned it earlier. Jack smiled with satisfaction.
Great, then. I have someone I want you to meet. I'll bring them here, so wait for me.
Okay. The person he wants to introduce. I felt a sense of unease at the sound of those words. Soon, I could hear laughter coming from the hallway. It was Jack's voice and another, belonging to a young woman. As I was wondering about their seemingly close relationship, the door to the executive office opened.
Sorry to keep you waiting, Karen.
Jack said with a pleased expression. However, I was too stunned to respond to Jack, fixated on the woman standing next to him. She is a very young woman. Her hair was a shade of blonde, almost golden, wearing a miniskirt that revealed her thighs and a camisole with a plunging neckline, as if she was dressed for a night out. Yet, she wore it so well that I found myself marveling. So this is youth.
This is Michelle Smith. She's going to start working here today.
Pleased to meet you.
I was dumbfounded. Is he kidding me? My husband introduced me to the younger woman. Just this event alone is bad for my heart, and to add, we're not even hiring new graduates. Excuse me, I hesitate to ask you, but how old are you, Michelle?
She is 23 years old. I met her at a bar with some friends, and she came up to talk. We hit it off, and her youthful energy was refreshing. Don't you think her presence will boost our team's motivation, do you?
No, yes. He might be serious. Faced with Jack's glowing expression, I was at a loss for words.
So, Karen, could you teach Michelle the ropes?
Wait, she's going to work as a general employee, right? Then, perhaps someone else.
Oh, I forgot to mention, we're moving to a two-person secretary team. So, I'd like you to teach her about being a secretary.
A two-person team, is that necessary?
Come on, you're getting on in years. It might be good for you to pass some work on to the younger generation.
Jack's light-hearted laughter stabbed at my heart. Getting on in years, that way of putting it.
All right then, I'll leave it to you. I've got some errands to run outside. Take good care of her, will you?
With that, Jack left the executive office, leaving me and Michelle behind. I took a deep breath to calm myself. Once Jack makes up his mind, he charges ahead. Then, inevitably, he fails and ends up regretting it alone. This had happened often in our marriage. It was pointless to say anything now. For now, I'll just do as he says. It's bound to fail anyway.
Hey, Mrs. Karen.
Michelle tapped my shoulder. Yes.
How old are you, Mrs. Karen?
Feeling it would be wrong not to answer after asking her age, I told her the truth. I'll be 58 this year. However, my honest admission seemed not to reach Michelle.
What? You're the same age as my grandma. You might drop dead any moment. And yet you're still working. That's kinda sad.
I forced a smile. I like my job. It's not sad at all.
Oh, I see. It's the boss who's to be pitied, right? Whether he's at home or at work, he's stuck with the old lady all the time. Really, poor thing.
Her words kept coming one after another, making my face tense up. Excuse me, what exactly are you trying to say?
What? Don't you get it? I guess it's true what they say about getting slower with age.
Michelle sighed heavily and stated bluntly.
It means I, being young and beautiful, have a higher status than an old lady like you. You get that, right, Mrs. Old Lady?
Her smiling face as she said this sent shivers down my spine. I couldn't stay silent any longer. You really need to learn some common sense.
Oh, did I make you mad? Or are you going through menopause or something?
What did you say?
See, you get angry so quickly. If you get this upset over such things, how can you keep working? Plus, menopause makes you sweat a lot and get out of breath, right? LOL, it's pathetic to try so hard. Maybe it's time you retired.
As I stood there dumbfounded, Michelle suddenly laughed and whispered in my ear.
Maybe it's time to retire as the president's wife, too.
I shuddered. This person intended to take Jack away from me. I raised my voice without thinking. That's enough. I can't teach someone with your motives any work. Leave the company now. I expected an argument, but Michelle just stared at me, and tears streaming down her face.
I'm sorry.
What?
I didn't mean it. I just wanted to get along with you, and joked, but this is too much, too cruel.
Michelle collapsed to the floor, sobbing. She looked like a tragic heroine.
I'll leave this company. Thank you for everything up to now.
Michelle rushed out of the room. What on earth is happening? I was so shocked by the sudden turn of events that I was left speechless for a while until Michelle returned, red-faced, with Jack.
What the hell are you doing?
Jack's sudden shout made me tremble. What's going on, dear?
I heard from Michelle. You yelled at her.
But she was saying such terrible things.
Don't lie. I've been listening to her conversation.
What? To my astonishment, Michelle had recorded our argument on her smartphone. The recording began with me scolding Michelle, giving the impression that I had suddenly started berating her for no reason, making her cry. So that's why she apologized so readily, even with sobs. I bit my lip in frustration. Don't you believe me?
Believe. Michelle came to me crying about what you did. There's even a recording. It's clear whose words have more credibility. A secretary who bullies employees is fired as of today.
What? I was in disbelief. I had supported Jack at home and in the company all this time. And now, he was choosing Michelle, who had just joined, over me. Wait, then who will do the secretary's job?
It's obviously going to be Michelle.
That's impossible. And what about Macau, you know? I caught myself, realizing what I had just said. I tried to phrase it in a way that only Jack and I would understand. You know about your hobby.
I can handle that myself. I prefer the pure and cute Michelle over you, who lies to me, the president. Besides, isn't a young and beautiful girl like her more suitable for me than you, who are older?
Jack squinted his eyes happily and looked at Michelle next to him. Michelle looked up at Jack with adoring eyes and flashed a brilliant smile. Then, when she turned her gaze to me, she stuck out her tongue slightly, taunting me. I protested repeatedly to Jack, but he refused to listen. The job of a secretary is not easy. Despite my arguments that it would be too difficult for Michelle, he only returned with overly optimistic responses, saying I was exaggerating or that we wouldn't know until we try. He must fancy himself a knight protecting his princess. I was speechless at his irrational excitement, not befitting someone who runs a company. Eventually, Jack threw away my personal items from my workspace. In their place, he arranged a brand new desk and cute, youthful stationery for Michelle. It's all in vain. Realizing this, I thought, I don't want to waste any more effort, and left the company. However, Jack did not return home that night, and he didn't respond to my messages either. I thought it was out of spite towards me, but as a week, a month, 3 months passed, I began to feel anxious. Then, one day, I was summoned to the company by Jack and headed to the president's office. Maybe he finally realized how difficult the secretary's job is. Is he thinking of firing Michelle and calling me back? With a glimmer of hope, I knocked on the president's office door.
Come in.
As I opened the door, I was greeted by an unbelievable sight. Jack, smiling happily, was holding hands with Michelle. They both looked at me and laughed gleefully.
It's been a while, Karen. We have some big news today.
What is it?
Actually,
Then, Michelle put her hand over Jack's mouth.
Let me say it, okay? I want to thank your wife too.
Right.
Jack nodded deeply, and Michelle said to me with a beaming smile.
We're getting married. Karen, you cared for my husband for a long time till now.
What? As I stood there, stunned, Jack chuckled awkwardly.
Yeah, I thought there's no point in hiding it. I'm thinking of starting a second life. You're old now. It's better for you to live quietly alone.
What is that supposed to mean? How dare you? I felt as if all the blood had drained from my body.
Wait, Karen, the story isn't over yet. Here is a gift for you. I even made a copy at a library just for you.
Michelle handed me several sheets of paper. They were black and white printed photos. Seeing them, I almost felt sick. This ultrasound picture, does it mean? Michelle nodded slowly and gently stroked her belly. As she came closer, she whispered in my ear.
I got pregnant with the president's baby. The spot as the president's wife is mine now.
At that moment, something inside me snapped. She had been ridiculing me, boasting about her youth, and constantly trying to one-up me. Now, she's taken my job as the company's executive assistant and is attempting to take my husband as well. Well, no more holding back. I'll see them plummet to the depths of hell. I decided to pretend to bless Jack and Michelle's union. I agreed the divorce with Jack. Of course, I received a hefty settlement. After that, they had a grand wedding in Hawaii. The situation changed a week later. I received a call from Michelle.
Hey, Jack hasn't come home. You're his ex-wife. You must know where he is, right?
Michelle's panicked voice. As expected, I smirked. Oh, I didn't say, but he has.
What?
I exposed my husband's terrible secret. He has a favorite hobby. He's probably in Macau right now.
Macau.
Haven't you heard? There's a big hotel in Macau with a casino. Jack always goes there whenever he has free time. Michelle gasped.
So that means?
Yes, Jack is probably indulging in gambling right now. I managed his schedule so he wouldn't get too caught up in it. I guess the new secretary didn't know. He didn't want to show his bad side of wasting earned money on gambling. Michelle was so shocked she couldn't say anything. I chuckled. I'm actually thankful to you.
What?
Jack got into gambling in the last few years, introduced by some new business associates.
What does that have to do with anything?
Before you came along, I still had some feelings for Jack. I was worried about him falling further, but now I've completely let go. Taking in such a worthless man, and even giving me a generous settlement, there couldn't have been a better opportunity. Thanks to you, I can enjoy my second life. I laughed heartily. From the phone came heavy breathing.
Don't mess with me, you old hag. Getting all high and mighty.
Well then, goodbye. You're going to have a hard time, Mrs. President. I said sarcastically, ignoring Michelle's ranting on the other end, and hung up. A few days later, I was relaxing in my new apartment when the doorbell rang. Is it a delivery? I don't remember ordering anything. Suspicious, I peered through the peephole. There stood my ex-husband, Jack, his face flushed with anger.
You're there, aren't you, Karen? How dare you say that to Michelle?
Pa, about the gambling. Understanding the situation, I decided to open the door and let Jack in. He must have gone to a detective agency to find my address. Running away now would only lead to him pursuing me again. Might as well settle this here. I had important information to tell him. I prepared a folder with documents before opening the door. It's been a while, hasn't it? I greeted him with a graceful smile.
How dare you smile after ruining someone's home?
Jack was furious, yelling and leaning in close to intimidate me. But such tactics have no effect on a wife who has stood by him for years. Oh dear, why are you so red in the face? What happened?
It's none of your business.
I couldn't help but laugh. He had come here just to vent his anger. But I could see right through them. It must have been a marital spat, right?
Shut up.
Michelle must not be thrilled about you spending most of your income on gambling. She managed your salary, and you were put on an allowance system, weren't you? Jack froze in shock.
How? How did you know that? Did you bug me or something?
His serious questioning made me burst into laughter. Because we had the same conversation before, when your gambling was discovered, and you said, "What's wrong with spending my own money on my hobbies?" I bet you said the same thing to Michelle, and after fighting with her, you're taking it out on me, aren't you? Jack bit his lip and clenched his fists, falling silent. Don't underestimate the wife of 30 years. I thought to myself as I looked at the frustrated Jack. I want you to appreciate that I was your secretary. I expertly managed your schedule to minimize your gambling time, to prevent your downfall. I wonder if a naive 23-year-old like Michelle can do that.
Well, that is.
Well, you'll have to make do, won't you? Especially now that you're having a baby. Baby. The moment I mentioned the word, Jack's face lit up. What a predictable man.
Yes, that's right. Michelle and I are having a child. Unlike you, who's infertile, she can bear me a successor. You've lost as a woman.
Jack looked down on me triumphantly. Well, that's good for you.
We're happy. Stop trying to ruin my family. I came here today to warn you.
Jack pointed at me sharply. I tilted my head, feigning innocence. Me, ruin your family? I have no such intention. In fact, I'm here to help you.
Help me.
Confused, Jack gaped at me. Did you go to the obstetrician with Michelle?
What? That's a place for women. Michelle said she wanted to go alone, so I didn't accompany her.
You've seen the ultrasound photo, right? The glossy, thick paper, photo paper.
No, what I saw was on regular thin paper.
I thought so. I presented Jack with several photos from the clear folder. Grainy, black and white photos. They were ultrasound images of a baby. Jack's eyes widened.
Is this supposed to be your pregnancy?
Of course not. This is what Michelle gifted to me. She's quite prepared, isn't she, printing these off the internet for me.
The internet?
To a puzzled Jack, I handed over a piece of paper. It was a printout of a certain SNS article. It was written 2 years ago. It was a pregnancy announcement, complete with ultrasound photos. Compare these photos. Notice anything? After looking back and forth between the photos and the article, Jack's face turned pale.
Wait, it means...
That's right. I overlaid Michelle's ultrasound photo with the article's photo, holding them up to the light. From the noise to the baby's silhouette, they match perfectly. Ever heard of image search? It's a feature that searches the web for images similar to the one you have. That's how I found this SNS. She must have copied the entire article and cut out the photos neatly.
So, the baby...
Jack's face went completely white, looking as though he was about to collapse. I decided to give him the final blow with one more statement. It's all the lie. There's no one in her belly. Jack collapsed to his knees.
No way. She wouldn't lie about something like that. It's impossible. After everything I bought for her, designer clothes, bags, even an expensive engagement ring.
Jack vented his middled emotions by repeatedly pounding the floor with his fist. His pathetic state almost made me smile. It's unfortunate you can't become a father. If you think about it, considering your age, it's dubious whether you're even capable of fathering a child. Believing that just because she's young, she would get pregnant was a naive thought.
Oh, my.
Find out the truth from Michelle directly. I'll call her over for you now. Jack probably didn't even have the energy to argue. He remained silent and slumped. I called Michelle to the apartment. Soon, the doorbell rang, and I opened the door. Upon seeing Jack and me together, Michelle screamed.
What are you doing here? Trying to steal Jack back from me?
That's not it. Haven't I said I'm grateful to you?
I have a baby in my belly. You can't break us apart.
Michelle yelled triumphantly, not listening to me. She stepped into the room with her shoes on and gently embraced Jack's shoulder.
Are you okay? Let's go back and talk about money again. I'll manage the salary, okay? We'll overcome this trial together because in my belly is...
Shut up.
Jack slowly stood up. He stared at Michelle and spoke quietly.
The pregnancy is the lie, isn't it?
Michelle's face contorted visibly.
What? What are you talking about?
Tell me the truth, Michelle.
I am pregnant. I showed you the ultrasound photo. Our baby is the fruit of our love. Denying that is cruel.
Michelle sat down on the floor, sobbing. However, she quickly looked up and glared at me.
Karen must have poisoned your mind. Jealous because you're old and I'm young and beautiful.
Michelle huffed in arrogance. I just laughed in return. Is that all you have to say?
What? Hey, Jack, let's just go home. Come on.
Michelle pulled at Jack's arm. Jack shook her off.
That's enough, Michelle.
What?
Jack presented the blog article copy and the ultrasound photo to Michelle.
There's no escaping the truth now. I believed in you. Why did you lie about something like this? When you said you were pregnant, I was overjoyed to tears.
Then, Michelle's expression faded.
Hey, Jack.
What now?
Michelle looked up at Jack with teary eyes, trying to appeal to him.
I just wanted to test your love for me. I was afraid of being just a fling. That's why I said I was pregnant. Then you said you wanted me to have a baby, right? I was so happy.
Seeing Michelle's beaming smile, Jack seemed somewhat appeased.
So, it was because you loved me that you lied.
That's right. We can still have a baby, can't we? Our child would inherit my beauty and your brains. One day, they'll become the president and earn lots of money.
That's impossible. I interrupted Jack and Michelle's delusional world, bringing them back to reality.
Hey, we were just getting to the good part.
Do you really think this man has money? I asked calmly.
Of course, he's the president, after all.
I see, indeed, our company has been around for generations and isn't doing poorly. But that's about the company as a whole. This man is a gambler. You understand what that means, right?
What?
Michelle's face turned pale as she clung to Jack.
Hey, Jack, you're rich, right? You told me so, that you have more money than you know what to do with, and that we live a wealthy life once we're married.
Jack responded in a faltering voice when pressed.
It's fine. I may have lost some money at the casino recently, but we're starting a new venture at the company soon. That'll be a big win.
What are you talking about? I pointed out Jack's ugly lie. I know, you have no intention of starting any new venture.
What do you mean?
You got financial support from the chairman recently, right? Where is that money now? Surely it hasn't been spent on designer brands and an engagement ring for your new wife. I glared at Jack.
What are you talking about? I would never do that.
Jack laughed dismissively, but his voice trembled. I sighed briefly. You embezzled company funds, didn't you? Jack swallowed hard as I stared him down. I've been suspicious. Since the beginning of the year, you've been saying we're starting a new venture and got financial support from the chairman. But there's been no progress on any venture. You haven't even tried to make progress. And then, on to the next new venture. It's strange not to be suspicious. So, I talked to the chairman and decided to get solid evidence.
You two teamed up against me. Then, the deposit from Kevy the other day was
a decoy. You transferred the venture funds directly into your account. You've been making it hard to trace by using various accounts, but this time you put it directly into your own. What? Were you that desperate for money, trying to prove to Michelle you were wealthy? As I laid out the facts, Jack could only mumble. I delivered the final blow. You're finished. Get arrested and live the rest of your life as a convict.
Shut up. This was all done within the family. It'll probably just end with probation. Besides, Kevin will pay the bail. Even if I'm charged, I'll be out soon.
Jack tried to reassure himself.
Why do you even know about this? You were fired by me. It's none of your business.
The chairman told me.
Kevy did.
Yes, I was hired by him.
What?
Jack's mouth fell open in shock. I explained calmly. He contacted me right after he heard you'd left me. He apologized for your terrible actions and asked if he could hire me back. I said yes immediately. You didn't know.
He kept that from me. That's outrageous.
I'm grateful to him. He's put me in charge of schedule management, and my salary is even better than before. As I smiled broadly, Jack gritted his teeth.
Damn Kevin. I'll confront him right now.
Just as Jack was about to leave,
Hey,
Michelle grabbed Jack's arm. She pulled him towards her, their faces inches apart. Her expression was demonic.
hey, old man.
What?
Startled by Michelle's unusually deep voice, Jack froze. Michelle took a deep breath and yelled,
You deceived me. Flaunting your wealth, and then turns out you're just an old criminal. What a joke.
I'm sorry, Michelle.
Jack, clearly terrified, tried to gently hold Michelle's hand. He looked into her eyes and slowly said,
But it's okay. I'll probably get probation and be able to return home. I may be ousted from the company, but we can be happy without money, right?
Don't joke with me.
Michelle shook off Jack's hand and looked at him as if he was filth.
A broke old man like you living with a young and beautiful woman like me. Impossible. I lied about being pregnant to get married. What a waste of time. Nowadays is staying on my family register. The worst.
Michelle pushed past Jack and left the room.
Michelle. Wait, Michelle.
Shut up.
Bang! Michelle slammed the door behind her. Jack, abandoned by his new wife, stood at the entrance like a ghost. I spoke to Jack. Please leave. This is my house.
Hey, Karen.
What?
Can we start over? Me as the president and you as the secretary. Just like before.
Jack showed a pleading smile, but I shook my head firmly. That's impossible. I really hate you. I never want to see your face again. Jack's eyes widened, and he began to tremble. That's enough of that. I opened the door and pushed Jack out. As I locked the door and began watching TV, Jack, having realized everything was over, quietly left the apartment. Later, Jack was arrested. He had hoped Kevin would pay his bail, but that expectation was dashed as he was taken to a cold jail cell alone. Jack was arrested for embezzling the funds provided by Kevin for supposed new ventures. However, he also raised funds by telling clients and affiliated companies that he was starting new ventures, then transferred this money into his personal account for private use. Jack was sentenced to actual prison time without probation, and it seemed he wouldn't be out for several years. As for Michelle, she was suspected of conspiring with Jack and was investigated. Although no evidence of conspiracy was found, the police discovered she had been scamming money from various company executives. She would approach men who appeared wealthy in bars, become friendly, then claim to be their girlfriend. She would then lie about being pregnant or needing money for a parent's surgery, coaxing large sums of money from them. In essence, Jack was just one of Michelle's many victims. Michelle was arrested for fraud. Thus, both of them ended up in the care of the police. Half a year has passed since Jack's arrest. I am still working with the chairman. Recovering the company's image after the scandal is not easy, and he is always troubled. I want to support the chairman by his side. Feeling indebted to him, I am determined to help. One evening, I returned to the company with the chairman. He sank deeply into his chair and let out a sigh.
It's been a tiring day.
We had several business dinners in a row. The chairman smiled at me.
Yes, but thanks to you choosing a good restaurant, the meal was enjoyable. Many of our business partners are around my age, so they appreciated the healthy yet luxurious restaurant. Moreover, no one knew about the restaurant today. It was like a surprise. Thanks to that, The conversation flowed. Thank you.
The chairman's face lit up with a gentle smile. His demeanor is always calm and composed, a stark contrast to Jack's impulsiveness. He speaks with respect to everyone, his earnest character shining through in every interaction. I find myself drawn to the human qualities he exhibits. Such generous words. As I bowed my head, the chairman sighed with satisfaction.
To think my foolish brother once had someone as capable as you as a partner. Truly astonishing.
I let out a light chuckle. Former partner, I have no ties with him anymore.
Ha, indeed. By the way, Karen, how long do you plan to work? Don't you ever think about retiring and living a quiet life at home?
I answered with a smile. I love my work. As long as I'm able, I wish to continue working. The chairman nodded happily, several times.
I want you to help me rebuild this company. It's going to be a long partnership, but I'm counting on you from here on out.
I nodded vigorously. Yes, Chairman. When I responded enthusiastically, the chairman, finding it amusing, laughed cheerfully. Watching him, I felt a warmth in my heart. My second life is going to be fulfilling. As I gazed at his smiling face, I was filled with this hopeful thought.